Yes. Of course.
Okay. Hello, everybody, and thank you for being with us both online and in person today for the 2023 disaster debris workshop. I just wanted to go over some housekeeping items real quick. There is coffee and water in the back with some snacks. If you need to find the trash cans, they're hidden, and these little cabinets behind you, it says trash. And if you need to use the restroom or anything, just feel free to get up and go. It's past the elevators to the right. And I think we're going to get started here right on time. So I'm going to hand it over to John so he can introduce himself and his team.
Thank you all. Thanks for coming in person. For those of you here, as well as for those of you who are online, we appreciate you and your attendance. We have got a really good, we have a really good presentation today. We're getting started right at 1:30. As you may know, that this meeting is being recorded. So for those of you who are online, we want to make sure that you have an opportunity to engage with us as the presenters. And I'll do some introductions here very briefly. But as far as housekeeping goes, please, if you are online and you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat function. The chat function is there to make sure that you have any questions that we'll try to answer them as soon as possible. That chat is being monitored by the folks here who are at 3555 Timmons here at H-GAC. And so we'll go ahead and get things started. I'll first introduce myself. My name is John Burry. I'm director of our post-disaster programs within Tetra Tech. I've had the privilege of working with H-GAC really nearly my entire career since one of my first projects in 2001, where H-GAC was engaged in disaster debris management planning very, very early on. One of the first studies that I know of in the nation that has had a focus on disaster debris management, and it has just continued to do so. And certainly with the region and its population growth, as well as the number of debris generating events that we've had here, that certainly has been something I know a lot of local governments have benefited from. I have a background in disaster recovery and policy and management, and having worked a number of different debris generating events. Most recently was Hurricane Ian in Florida, as well as working with my colleague, Nick Russo, in the city of Austin following the ice storm there. So Nick, I'm gonna ask you, do you wanna do a quick introduction here?
Yeah, howdy everybody, Nick Russo with Tetra Tech. Have a strong background in environmental management and support our disaster recovery division with environmental project management, as well as disaster debris monitoring. My debris management experience goes back to Hurricane Ike with local governments, Harris County in the region. Was involved in the Tax Day flood, Hurricane Harvey, a couple other smaller storm events. And as John mentioned, Hurricane Ian, and then some of the most recent Central Texas ice storm work. So happy to be here and talk to you guys today.
Thanks, Nick. And Brian Rutherford.
Good afternoon. I'm Brian Rutherford, also with Tetra Tech. I've been with Tetra Tech for about 15 years. I've done a lot of debris management planning across the country, and a lot of it in Texas. And also have done a lot of response to debris generating incidents as well in Texas and California and other places, but looking forward to talking with you today.
And Brian, again, we try to bring different perspectives to this event. And so you've got Brian, who's been a part of the planning process. I mean, really in places like city of Los Angeles and up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, up down here near the coast, has been a part of wildfires and hurricanes, things along those lines. So he's going to bring that perspective. Nick is going to be here bringing the perspective of a local government, and so his spending, I mean, almost 20 years with the county there, and now in the private sector. And so I'm going to try to keep things moving and try to give you some of my thoughts as what we're seeing in the industry, as well as with FEMA, as well as some planning considerations. So what we're going to do is an introduction, really a look back over the past year. Some big disasters have occurred, and we're going to talk about those and the importance of disaster debris management. Then we're going to get into kind of the blocking and tackling of debris management, kind of a debris management 101, and probably the three biggest drill downs I'd say we're going to have is debris management sites, where are you going to store the material? Then we're going to get into public information, how are you going to communicate with the public, and then managing your finances. So the financial aspect and the money aspect of this engagement. So I have before we look back this year, you look at the billion-dollar weather events. This always, amazes me, with all the disasters that you don't hear about. You may have heard about Hurricane Ian. You always got to watch out for those I storms. When you get to I in the alphabet during that season, y'all are going to have to make sure you're paying attention there, whether it's in Florida, Texas, wherever. It's always not looking good. You also had some tornadoes that always seem to hit the mid-south states, those being really, really not good. Then you have your derechos in the central part of the U.S. and then out west, obviously drought and wildfire being tremendous events. I have, and then you see, look at that overall damage, $2.4 trillion with 341 events that are climate driven. So one of the things I want to show you here, and this is part of the interactivity of this event. If I can get this thing to work here. Oh, here we go. Let's see. Here are the slides here. So one of the things we like to do is I like to look at things using Power BI. Do y'all know what Power BI? It's part of Microsoft. I think it's Microsoft, or is it? Well, I think it may be Microsoft or Amazon, one of the two big ones. What have you. But this is from FEMA's database. Okay, FEMA has this great tool called the Open Data Set. It's you can go to FEMA.gov. You can find all of this information out. But I really, kind of put things into perspective. This bar chart that you see right here is all of the dollars expended, okay? These are, and I took out COVID from this event right here. You can see really where those disasters are coming in right after the, right before the 2000s. And you can also see hurricanes being, as far as dollar-wise go, just, by and large, the most impactful. Then, of course, severe storms, those wildfires, just the sheer number and volume of disasters being there in the Western United States, but even moving into other areas. And then, flooding being that next big event. The next thing I wanted to show you was, this is again FEMA's data, not mine, is Category A expenditures. So when you hear about Category A during today, you're going to hear about that's what we mean when it comes to debris. Okay, so debris is classified as Category A. These are the Category A costs or debris-related costs from, let's see, 2017 to 2023. So $8.6 billion that the federal government has paid out for these types of activities. So 8.6, and the total project amount is 9.6 billion. So there's still some that's in review, about $1 billion. But again, just to put that in perspective, this is not COVID. This has nothing to do with masks or any other costs that local governments have experienced over the last 3 years. Just debris is that much. And you can look at the state governments in places like California lead the way with some of their tremendous historic wildfires there. At the county level, Florida winning the race there with places like or disasters like Irma and Maria. Louisiana with hurricanes like Laura and Delta, and then Puerto Rico with Irma and Maria. City and county. So we're number 3, solid 3 here in state of Texas. I feel good about that. I feel good about where we where we rank in all this. Again, not to make light of this, but certainly Florida, Louisiana, Texas, on the Mount Rushmore of disaster states. So that's to kind of put things into perspective. And as we drill down, I want to go into a few of these incidents occurring over the last year. Hurricane Ian, the Central Texas ice storm, and then a no notice event, the Mississippi Valley tornado outbreak. Hurricane Ian was a tremendously destructive event. September 28th of last year, it was a wind event as much as it was a storm surge event. Southwest Florida in the Naples, Fort Myers area has not been impacted by a direct hit like this in many, many years. Just flattened towns, flattened things in its way. Before we get on, I wanted to share this with you. Again, this is on the stuff that weather nerds or guys like me like to watch. I wanted to tell everybody, we're not getting paid for this. I just like this website is Mike's weather page. If you look up spaghettimodels.com, it has everything under the sun on it. This is what guys like Nick, me, we're on this website. We're looking at this. It shows a lot of, whether it's storm surge inundations, spaghetti models, all that sort of stuff. It's kind of turned into the one-stop shop. So this is what we were doing when it came to Hurricane Ian in the days before this event. Again, flattened homes with the high winds and then the robust storm surge that was out there. So Nick, you were out there first on the ground. I was not. I broke my foot the day before I was supposed to go.
That's right. You did break your foot. I forgot
I had
about
a Liz
that.
Frank injury.
Thank you for reminding me of that great visual. I remember I was in an office and John comes stumbling in on crutches in Naples, Florida. Like, what did you do, man? But we wanted to talk about a couple of things about Hurricane Ian. Number one, it was a late season storm, right? Came in the end of September. As John mentioned, looking at spaghettimodels.com, I don't know if you guys recall, but Ian had a kind of a major shift near the end. So folks that were down in, Collier County, south of Fort Myers, where the most devastation was, we know some folks that, kind of thought they were going to make it through the storm with, just maybe some localized flooding, no major wind impact. And Naples and Marco Island's the last place before you kind of round the peninsula into the Keys. They got a major storm surge and, really impacted a lot of their initial coastal zone in the community. That's where all the damage was. So you had a lot of, you see the photo of the boats in the roadway. Boats were everywhere. A lot of damaged cars and flooded cars. And very expensive flooded cars.
Holy smokes.
The McLaren, the Lamborghinis, but just everywhere, cars, boats, and these two pictures are representative of the volume of C&D material that will come out, or construction and demolition debris that we call C&D. And we bring that up because as planners and debris managers, we're constantly focused on what is the impact from this storm or hurricane going to be? What type of debris are we going to encounter? And in flood events, you see a lot of C&D as compared to, hurricane obviously with surge, but most of us expect with wind a lot more vegetation. So in this part of Florida, it was really a mix of, C&D from homes, residential areas, commercial facilities, and then a mixture of down vegetation.
Nick, the one thing I would say with this one is that Collier County, which is the county where Nick was at, had been intently focusing on the commercial aspect of their debris recovery for the last 10, 15 years. This is one where they had a lot of lessons learned after the 2004 hurricanes. And for those of you who may have low-lying areas, may flood, or may have a storm surge. Peggy, you were talking, about you here there in Palacios there. Certainly commercial is a big unknown component of the disaster. And certainly, like you said, something that you look at that volume of debris.
Yeah, and in the Naples areas, the top photo is pretty representative. of just major roadways along the coast that became completely inundated, debris, into travel lanes, which poses a driving and an emergency access type life and safety health issue. So the communities there really had to deal with this and work through a FEMA process of, as you guys may know, asking, FEMA for, permission for commercial debris to be eligible for reimbursement, but also basically having to make those decisions on their own and begin to pull debris out of those roadways and keep that process moving. So I think on the next slide, we sort of talk about some of the challenges there. I'll start with, resource logistics in this part of Florida. You had a tremendous amount of resources that were coming to the region,
That's right.
everywhere from basically Tampa south down to the Keys. I know for us, housing for the number of workers was immediately a problem. I mean, you think you had a hotel reservation or a block of rooms and you get there and basically, you don't. So that was something that all responders basically had to deal with. I know we ended up in a lot of basically Airbnbs and stuff like that.
That was a new thing for 2023, Airbnbs for a big deployment. I would say when you are talking about, for those of you who do have contracts, you are expecting people to come in from out, understanding that they know what sort of housing challenges that are going to take place is a big deal. And even the residual flooding, right?
Right.
Nick, as far as some of the resource or the logistical challenges.
Yeah, I think it was somewhere around Fort Myers. Well, I guess west of Fort Myers, the Sanibel Island area was completely devastated, and the bridge going into Sanibel was destroyed. So I know the Corps of Engineers really had a pretty significant rescue mission to get resources over to that island. There was also one of the main interstates that would bring you north-south on the west coast of Florida was inundated, kind of similar to like the tollway issue we had here in Harvey. So you had a major interstate that was blocked by the Punta Gorda River for a while. And as well as just, thinking about, I know on that slide, we're not looking at it right now, but communication and power, is always going to be an issue in major hurricane events. Definitely was here. Yeah.
And didn't you say that this Tampa area was where they thought Ian was going?
Yeah.
Right? Up until about, what do you think, a day before,
Yeah,
2 days before? It was going to go here, and then it went about right here.
Right.
That's a big difference.
And then put that lower coast on, the dirty side with the storm.
And then Naples,
hug
it's
the
got
coast.
24 feet of storm surge, 14 feet, 18 feet of storm surge. It went
18.
here, storm surge here. It was supposed to go there. So we had people that stayed in their homes. And they
Sure did.
homes turned into an island. So, I mean, I will just say the weather prediction, where they think it's going to come in, that's certainly not an exact science yet. Sorry.
Back to the slideshow. All
There you
right,
go.
so we talked about communication. That's something I think we want to stress to this entire audience, is to think about how you communicate with your stakeholders, your key personnel, and your contractors that you need to talk to, immediately after landfall. Let's talk about the workforce. Okay, so you do have a lot of folks coming in. Some of those companies need to make hires. Hiring people is different now post-COVID. So that was something that we did have to really sort of, use some alternative strategies to work around. And we work with communities when we need to hire a large presence of local monitors to, have recruiting events, bring people in through various sources of recruitment, Facebook, LinkedIn, Indeed, all those sorts of things. Misinformation was out there really in terms of, FEMA guidance. The commercial debris was a hot topic, and a lot of varying information on social media that we as practitioners are going to kind of always have to address.
And you hate to say that things have gotten worse. I mean, I sound like that's like something my dad once told me. I mean, they're always talking about how it used to be great in my day. I will not, I'm not going to sound like that now, but I'm going to tell you the misinformation piece was a big deal. One of the challenges that we had was, again, me and my bum foot there, but it turned out to be a blessing because I was kind of that incident action planner, in another location, kind of a still, and you could see all this stuff happening and monitoring social media channels like Twitter and Nextdoor, things along those lines, trying to track some of the stuff down. Because so many of these decisions are so expensive, you are talking about making decisions based on half truths or what have you. And that's a big challenge. So it's always something to verify, trust but verify, I guess is what I would say there. All right.
So again, with this issue about the commercial debris and what we're trying to show you in these slides is basically debris from large, mass quantities of condo high rises, apartments. So you got the population coming back to basically remediate their residence, in a high rise, and basically all the debris is coming out to the public right away. And there's really no other place to put that. In the photo on the right, we had to work with FEMA and Florida Department of Emergency Management personnel to really inspect, go out and look at, the types of properties or the exact locations that the community wanted to be able to remove that commercial debris from those areas. And that can be, number one, it's a process. Number two, it takes time. And there's a lot of documentation involved. So that's just something that we have to deal with when it comes to commercial and even private gated communities.
And that's one thing I'll share with you, for those of you who are here in person as well as online, is the issue of private and gated communities is something I think will continue to evolve as we have disasters and we continually have these events. It felt like there was a unique set of circumstances in the Southwest Florida area that I don't know if it's going to be applied in Texas if we have one here. I don't know, Nick, if you think the zip code based type of
Well, it was
approvals.
the census tracts, if you recall.
Yeah. So they were approving things by census tracts. Is that right,
Yeah.
Nick? So what did that mean? What does that mean? That means if you're in a census tract, what happens?
So if you think about it, everybody's in a census tract, right? But they were looking at population and income levels or socioeconomic data, basically of certain income, certain census tracts, and applying basically a damage metric, if you will, to that census tract. So I think the categories they were using was like catastrophic damage. Was that census tract, did it have catastrophic damage in it? And then the next one was, severe, and then a moderate. And so if you can imagine all these communities, and this was like across the state, everybody in these areas is trying to assess or provide data to FEMA in the state to say, yeah, this area, in this census tract has severe damage, and working with FEMA on exactly what does that mean, right?
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
I didn't know what it mean. What's severe to me?
Or catastrophic.
What does catastrophic mean?
Yeah.
My definition of catastrophic might not be the same as Aaron's. And Erin, she's the one who's responsible for approving this. And so you've provided all. Again, we're going down this hole here because as you prepare for this next hurricane season, understanding there is a lot of variability and getting information in through damage assessments. We'll talk about the PSTAT tool. Brian's going to talk about that in a minute. That has tremendous impacts to your debris management program.
Yeah, and to wrap up this slide with that point, I would say the biggest thing you can do, early on is really get good damage assessment data.
Huge.
From your staff or even external resources if you need to do that to really, help to drive what are your costs, how much debris is out there, and categorizing that back to, your neighborhood level or your jurisdiction.
Yeah. So where we're going to go next, we're going to come back to here, our home state of Texas, and talk about Central Texas, Travis and Williamson County, Austin, Round Rock, Liberty Hill, all those areas up in central Texas, and talk about the massive ice storm that impacted their, crippled their community and their infrastructure. So I'd say a lot of the ice storms that we've responded to happen in that January 3rd to February 2nd. And ice storms are a fascinating disaster. Really certainly difficult from a electrical perspective, a lot of trees going down, not a ton of loss of life usually. But they certainly can cripple a community region. I'll show you this, and certainly we've had our fair share of ice storms here in the Houston-Galveston area, all the way out to Beaumont. It's interesting how how thin of an area, thin of a line you can get these. But going along with our theme of websites we like to nerd out on in the weather side, the SPIA Ice Index page, Sperry Pilts Ice Index. They've got a great website where they'll give forecasts for states, regions. I'll go down to Texas. I doubt we're having any ice right now. I'll tell you that right. But what it does show is it'll show the ice accumulation index over on this side of and then it'll actually show you what level of catastrophic damage or what level of damage. So it takes ice plus wind, and then it'll tell you how bad as bad and how big is big. The next website is the Winter Weather Prediction Center, WPC. I like to go to this page too. This page will show you, it'll show you, again, not much this time of year on the winter weather side, but you go to freezing rain probability forecast, and it'll show you greater, and here you go, freezing rain. So you can look at 1/100th of an inch, 1/10th of an inch, up to 1/4 inch, and up to 1/2 inch. So 1/2 inch is where stuff starts to get real. That's when trees really start to be impacted. You look at, and this, we'll get into this disaster, and some of the unique elements of it. But you can see some pictures there. One of the things I will say that's important with this disaster is that it was not declared by FEMA until April 21st. So February, March, almost in April. That's what, 85 days?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
yeah.
It's a long time. And so what we're going to underscore there is that these communities were not certain that they would receive FEMA reimbursement for close to 85 days. That's a long time to answer your counsel. Hey, is FEMA going to be here? I don't know. I can't tell you. And that is part of this process. And again, to underscore that not all disasters are no-brainers. And that's something that we definitely saw here. So Nick, you want to go into some of the interesting elements of this one?
Yes, sir. Hey, one of the things, there's not that many people in here, but I just want to show of hands. I know you know about this storm now, but at the time, did you like hear about it or anything? Everybody hear about this? I don't see any hands.
Cheryl's got a hand.
Cheryl did, but see, you don't count. You came and visited. Yeah, the reason I say that is because when this happened, and the reason we're talking about it to you today is there was so much debris in the Central Texas region. I mean, I'm not kidding. It's like Austin got hit by a hurricane.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people outside of, if you weren't there, they don't really know. It's like, yeah, there was an ice storm. Everybody heard about the power outages. I know we were looking at that as a planning tool before.
Oh yeah, planning. Oh yeah, that's a good one too. I should have. ERCOT.
ERCOT has the power outage.
ERCOT has a power outage map. That's really super. Number of households impacted.
Yeah, another really good source of information. Small plug for Jeff Linder, local hero.
Local hero.
Yeah, he'll spit you out all those websites and graphs. But yeah,
Space City Weather too.
Space City Weather.
Space City Weather. Those guys.
Yep.
Super good.
So anyway, the ice storm showed up, lasted a couple of days. We were there working with City of Austin, so we're going to share some information about their particular situation. But you basically had debris from about the Bastrop region up to Temple. We
Up to
didn't
Temple.
realize all the way to Temple at the time, but Temple actually did some debris removal. And so you had a lot, and then I guess about as far west as San Antonio.
Not even that,
And a little
maybe
bit-
San Marcos.
A little bit to the
Maybe,
east.
maybe.
Yeah, so really it was just in that Austin.
2-3 county
San
region.
Antonio. Yep,
Very small.
yep. But a lot of debris. And so pictures like this, you can't see it, but there's a house behind the frozen tree, the limbs on the ground. Austin ended up collecting over 1 million cubic yards of vegetative debris from that event. And that was the city of Austin alone. That doesn't count for, private debris removal or basically people paying, landscape companies to haul their stuff off. Some of the other communities that are in that area, like the mud districts, may have had some separate projects. We also had a Travis County project with almost, I guess, about 100,000 cubic yards, and then some other folks in that area. So let's go next slide.
Sure. And just to let you know, 1 million cubic yards is like the badge of honor. I mean, that really, you do a 1 million yard event and you earned your stripes.
That's true.
He's got 4 or 5 of them under his belt. He's got
Well, I mean, to paint you a separate picture, we talked about Hurricane Ian in Collier County. I think their total was like 1.3 million cubic yards of debris. So yeah, I mean, just a lot of debris in the Austin area all across the city. Couple more photos here, just typical of what you saw in the residential areas. And this was really early on, prior to people, over the weekend, as soon as they could thaw out, kind of get out there and chop stuff up and make big piles. And, basically everything was in the roadway. Keep next slide. So the city contracted their debris collection, really began pretty fast on February 6th. They had 3 different contractors working, along with their own solid waste department crews. There was 3 debris management sites. So you're going to hear a lot about debris management sites in this presentation. And we wanted to highlight that the city, with this amount of debris, needed to have 1 for each of their main contractors. The city was basically divvied up into zones and collection areas. And then they had 1 final disposal site. And what I'll mention here is, I don't know if you've ever heard of Dillo dirt, but in Austin, they take their wastewater sludge and basically compost it and add in organic matter from, vegetative debris collection, and they make Dillo dirt. And so the city took all of the vegetative debris from this operation to Hornsby Bend, and is basically, has or will be using all of that material for that, separate operation. So full recycling process there. There wasn't any burning, which is another thing I think we've got some slides on in this talk. So contracted collection reached 1 million cubic yards in 30 days, which is extremely, extremely impressive. That's just shows you the amount of resources that were there from those debris hauling companies. And that coincided with about the timing of a first pass collection. Really in this storm, I mean, all the debris was kind of out there at one time. Yes, it did need to be cut up. Some residents needed to do that or pull stuff from the backyard to the front. So really, the second-ish pass was kind of the final pass there in city of Austin.
and also, so a couple of big things here that'll tie into our presentation today. Number 1 is, you heard Nick say that this disaster ended on February 1st. Trucks were rolling on February 6th. That's 5 days. The only way they were able to do this is because they had pre-disaster contracts in place. Okay.
That is
The
true.
other communities, Williamson, Travis, all the other ones, it took them nearly 30 days to get things started. I just want to, tell you how important it is to have these disaster contracts. I think a lot of people see the value now in Central Texas, as well as other, areas of the state. And then that, like I said, that 1 million, that's tremendous. Here's your debris management sites.
Here's a couple photos from one of those debris management sites. You can see basically the unloading and the stockpiling in the bottom left. You see the grinding operation up top in the right. Again, all of this material was ground reduction by grinding. The city was not interested in doing any type of burning, although other communities in the region did. So that's one thing you always have to think about is how much volume, how much debris is this storm bringing us? What are we going to do with that debris and how are we going to get rid of it? And the longer that process takes, the more a concern the volume of debris really begins to be. So I know Jamie's in here with Ashbrit. He could definitely talk about this, but in terms of grinding and mulching, eventually in a community, you will saturate that market. There's only so many places for that material to go if you're not going to burn it. And so that's something that we really did see start to become a problem up here in Central Texas. Again, some communities really more open to trying to burn and get rid of the debris in that manner as much as possible. We wanted to talk about a couple of, or really the one main special consideration here. If you've ever been, to Austin or the Hill Country and you see these trees that are standing that look like they're dead, there is a significant disease there with oaks, and it's called oak wilt. So oak wilt is I'm not going to get into this, but it's like a fungus and it's spread by a beetle. It's apparently a really big deal in Austin, and they decided to basically handle all of the tree cut work with special provisions. So tree cut work, I mean, leaner hanger, stump removal, debris removal programs. And basically they had some experts come up with, a specification that was, when a contractor cut a hazardous limb, before he went to the next tree, he or she would clean the saw cutting equipment and then paint over the oak wilt. And so it did take a little bit of time to work through this process, if you can imagine, with different experts weighing in on their opinion and modifying or working with contractors on, the process and any contract modifications that may need to be made, and then to go out and do that work. But they were really concerned, especially in a lot of parks,
Sure.
about not handling those tree cuts in a certain way and then spreading the disease, through to other trees in the parks.
This is the third ice storm that Central Texas has experienced in the last 3 years. I think that was one of them was the real bad one that knocked out the power to the entire state of Texas. Then they had like another one that still wasn't good. And then they had this one. So you've got these trees that are already stressed. You also have been, hearing about Central Texas and the drought. I mean, I don't know how many feet Travis is down, but so what we're saying is, these guys took matters in their own hands and worked with the contractors. And so would you say it's a successful mission, or was it bringing the specialists in? How did that, it seems like there's a lot of opinions about what's best for the tree. But
I think it'll take, only time will tell. I hate to say that, but at least, the jurisdictions there implemented a process to try to mitigate, further tree damage. So
I think that's important to understand, that you may have to bring in some experts, whether they're arborists, whether they're, other types of ologists. You never know what you're going to experience. In this case, we thought this was a really interesting one. And finally, we're going to talk about Mississippi Valley and the tornado outbreak there. Unfortunately, I don't have a good prediction center with something like this. Okay. This one is unfortunately using your ears and hearing those tornado sirens. This one took the lives of 17 people in a very rural area of Rolling Fork, Mississippi, just outside of Jackson. 190-mile-an-hour wind struck in the middle of the night. And so this one we wanted to highlight was, again, it was those spring tornadoes. Just to be aware of this one. And one of the biggest challenges was just the national media that impacted this area. You had Sharkey County, population 10,000 maybe. And so for those of you who may be watching us from rural communities, understanding that something like this happens, this is the president's coming down. Okay. You have this many people that pass away due to a severe weather event. You're going to see the governor, the president. Debris operations is going to be hampered by this. You're going to have a microscope on you. And in this situation, they brought in some, assistance, but then they were reaching out to the state for a lot of assistance. And I think that, I think a big thing here, as far as a lesson learned, is, that the state is a great resource, especially for those, with H-GAC being such a wide variety of coastal, inland, and upland communities, rural, suburban, and urban communities, in the 13 county region. Again, you have a lot of different challenges here, and this one was just extremely, extremely severe, but in a small area, but certainly still, I think it was over 500,000 cubic yards of debris, very expensive disaster. So with that, things to consider is, look, we haven't had a big wind event here in 2008. George W. was president. Lady Gaga's got her first album. A dozen eggs is at $1.99. What are eggs now? $5, $6, something like that. Katy Perry's coming out with "I Kissed a Girl." I appreciate you including that one, Brian, for me there. But this has been, we're almost at 15, 16 years since Hurricane Ike. Our canopy has grown. Our region has enjoyed a significant population boom. And some of those, whether it's your debris management sites that used to be your debris management sites, or that sapling that's now 20 feet taller, you're having a lot of things that are changing. And that's kind of where we wanted to go with today's Debris Management 101, is understanding that it's been almost 6 years since Harvey. Holy smokes. I mean, I thought that was when the Astros first started getting good. Astros were terrible during Ike. And so, 6 years since Hurricane Harvey. You got a lot of staff turnover. I've seen it with some larger jurisdictions, smaller jurisdictions, a lot of new elected officials. You have your contracts that have expired. Maybe you have a new debris hauler, debris monitor. You got new people, debris management plan. May have it, dusted that off. That looks like something that came out of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, with all the spider webs and everything on it. And then, as I mentioned, that land set aside for debris management may no longer be available. So, that's why we're up here today. That is why we wanted to make sure we started with some recent events, and then really underscoring the differences that we've seen. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian on the Debris Management 101 and talking about preparedness.
Yeah, so you want to make sure that you've done everything you can to be prepared. We've talked a lot about the horrible things that can happen and the response mechanisms that are needed to respond to those kind of things. But what are some things you can do today to be ready or to prepare for those kind of incidences? So that's what we wanted to talk about. So one, of course, we've already mentioned about the pre-position contracts, having those contracts in place so you're not having to put out the bid and do all this stuff in the middle of a disaster, trying to hurry up and get that process going. The other thing is either developing, if you don't already have one, or updating your disaster debris management plan. I've done a lot of these over the years, and I've been going back and doing updates to people's plans. Sometimes things change with your organization, or the rules change occasionally with FEMA, and the guidance and the regulations change. So you need to be mindful of that and have that in your plan as well. Also identify those debris management sites. Talked about the ones in Austin, and the fact that we've talked to a lot of folks who will go back and look at their sites, and maybe they're not available. Maybe where there was a big piece of land, now it's a store or a school or something has been built there. And so going back to make sure those sites that you're counting on to temporarily store and reduce your debris are still going to be available. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Also identify resources for recycling, reuse, and disposal. Making sure that there's, if you do have a debris generating disaster, what are you going to do with all this stuff? Where are some options for recycling it or reusing it or even just disposing of it? Another one is creating or updating your priority road list. So having an idea of, what needs to be done first, what roads need to be cleared first, because, right after something like this happens, the elected leaders are going to be getting calls and your jurisdictions are going to be getting calls. Hey, there's stuff on my road I can't get through. And so you're going to have a lot of people tugging on you for your priorities. And so you need to make sure have those determined ahead of time. Where are the hospitals that need, make sure you can get people to the hospital, make sure fire trucks can get out and do what they have to do, EMS, police. So making sure you've identified those main thoroughfares and others that need attention. And then also, of course, reviewing state and FEMA guidance and regulations since those change.
Brian, I was going to say, we've got a lot of folks who've attended online, almost 70 people online. And I wanted to highlight one person who's very important, very special here in the state of Texas, Valerie Blanton. She is the state's Yoda of disaster debris and is just an incredible resource. Valerie there in Austin is doing a series of workshops or a series of training, the G202 course, had one here in Galveston about 3 months ago, and is now doing them across the state of Texas. I want to make sure that you're aware of who she is. If you have questions for Valerie or questions for the state, she's got a ton of that information, especially if you're looking for preparedness activities, things along those lines. I'm always looking for those resources, hand up, hand out, someone to, you never know what you're going to get into as far as a pickle. And she's a great one as you're doing those preparedness activities.
Yeah, I've actually borrowed her expertise on a few different occasions. So she is a great resource. So one of the things we talked about is how do you prepare updated debris management plan? So, there's some parts of the plan that you need to have in place. So of course, the purpose and objectives. And then the other thing is know the types and anticipated quantities of debris. So, what are you going to be looking at? What types of debris, the quantities of debris that you might have to deal with. And then also your debris collection strategy. So who are you going to use, how are you going to use it, how are you going to use your staff, how are you going to use contractors, those considerations. Also, those disposal locations, like we talked about, those debris management sites. Another thing to consider is debris removal from private property. Ideally, we don't want to go on private property at all. You're just trying to remove it from the right of way, but there are occasions when it may be necessary to go on someone's private property and to remove debris. And we'll talk more about that.
Brian, I think we hit every one of those in the case study examples and real world examples of why these are so important. Everything from how you got to pick it up, this private property issue, the procurement of services. I mean, every one of these things are so important. No fooling. They are critical to the success of your debris program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course, procurement of contract services. How are you going to making sure you contract these services in the proper way so you get reimbursed for those expenses is really, really important. Then how are you going to use your own staff, force account labor, monitoring of debris operations is another important consideration. FEMA says if you're going to use contractors to pick up debris, you must monitor them or you risk not getting reimbursed for those costs. And so you can do it yourself, or you can also have a debris monitoring firm assist you with doing that. And debris monitoring, what that is documenting the types of debris, the quantities of debris that's being picked up and what happens with it. So that's another very important part of the plan, having that in place. Health and safety, of course, debris operations can be inherently dangerous. And so just making sure you have something in there about, what to do, what to wear, make sure people take the proper precautions so they don't get hurt. And then also, of course, the environmental considerations and regulatory requirements, there's quite a number of them. And so making sure you keep those in mind doing your debris operations. And then also very important is the public information strategy. And we have a whole section of this workshop dedicated to public information. We'll talk more about that, but it's really important to get the information out to the public. If you put the instructions out there, some people will actually follow that and will do the instructions and will actually help the whole recovery process go quicker for everybody.
Who are those people? I don't know who those people are, Brian. The people that follow directions. I feel like I deal with everybody who's not following directions. They're certainly, I don't know, those are the ones that are louder and more prevalent than the ones that are actually doing it. So
yeah, those are the ones that can take up more of your time, are the ones who don't follow the instructions. But getting the information out there, getting it out there early and often, and reinforcing those messages can make a big difference in your response. So one of the things we want to do is look at how bad is bad. So, looking at the estimates of debris quantities and the types of hazards for which your jurisdiction is vulnerable. So, what are you going to be looking for? What type of debris are you going to be having? And where's it, what are some options for dealing with it? So very important to consider those type of considerations in your plan. One of the things I always do, I've done about 50 of these plans across the country. And so one of the things I always do is get their hazard mitigation plan. So, make sure you have a hazard mitigation plan. But I usually look at that hazard mitigation plan to get an idea, okay, what is this jurisdiction vulnerable to? What are the hazards that they're vulnerable to? And then of those type of things, what's going to possibly generate debris? And so looking at that information can be really helpful. Also, FEMA has some information out there to help you to determine estimates of some hazards. I got this little booklet, it's been out forever. The Debris Estimating Field Guide that has some helpful information. Also, there's a tool called HAZUS that FEMA also has available where you can look up information about and get debris quantities from hurricanes, floods, tsunamis, which you don't think about a whole lot, and also earthquakes. So if you're doing planning for debris, that's a tool that if you have some experience with GIS, you can pull that information. And then one of the things I ran across in doing some work for some jurisdictions in the Midwest is ice storms. Of course, we talked about the one in the ice storm in Austin, but also, there's, it happens here as well. And there's a paper that came out, and I've got the link there that you can access that provides some actually really helpful models for coming up with debris estimates from an ice storm. And so there's like 4 different models in there, and you can pick the one that more closely aligns to your jurisdiction to come up with a potential assessment tool for ice storms for your community. So once you kind of get an idea of how bad is bad, it's also looking at, who's going to play a role in this? Who are the players? Who are the stakeholders in this plan? And so within your jurisdiction, of course, every jurisdiction is different, has different names for different departments, but, look at some of the ones to look at is Public Works is one. Of course, they have equipment to move debris, pick up debris, clear roads. And also they're familiar with the roadways because you want to make sure you don't venture off and out of your jurisdiction when you're picking up debris. Solid waste, of course, they're also going to have some equipment to move debris, and they have some knowledge of the debris disposal options or recycling options that might be available. And then parks, of course, they have equipment if you need to move debris off the roadway, they could help do that. But then a lot of times when you're talking about debris management sites to temporarily store that debris, and no one likes to think about parks being used for that. that's kind of, you don't want to think about your kids playing on, eventually playing on this where the debris has been sitting. But when you're looking at places to put debris, large swaths of property, where you have room to move trucks around and put debris, sometimes the park is the only option that a jurisdiction owns. And so looking at those parks and as potential sites that can be rehabilitated afterwards and put back to their original use.
If I could hop in here real quick about parks. You want to talk about people that need to be coming to the table. Parks Department needs to be at the table. They are, they've been voted in high school as most likely to do their own thing and not tell anybody about it after a disaster. Okay. They will use, a lot of times Parks has their own contracts. They will just do their own things. They think they have done it before. And I love Parks. I mean, I go to park nearly every week, but they really need to be wrangled, lassoed. They are really a lot of times that maverick organization that does that. And I mean that in the most complimentary way. They get stuff done. But when you're talking about financial and you're talking about whole community recovery and things where everybody's got to play good in the sandbox together, that's one that, sometimes doesn't happen as often. Nick, you do a lot of these meetings, bringing everybody together.
My example here would be whatever role you guys have in your organization in terms of debris, it's bringing, somebody has to be kind of like the czar or the manager and bring those groups in and be able to assist them with, decisions and things like that. What John was saying is, okay, maybe it's the Parks Department who's out there doing their own thing. It really could be, I've seen examples where it's, a Public Works Department or some other department that fits that example. And it can be a challenge if, let's say, you're the solid waste group and you have a Parks Department out here doing their own thing, or maybe then you find out later they've contracted some resources to do debris removal in a park. And here you are, you're running the show with some other contractors. So it's a coordination piece. You really need to pull the pieces together on who's doing what, who plays the role, and tracking all of that, not just your labor, but the debris stream, where it's going, and your costs.
All right. Hey, before we move on, I think we got a question. Is there any way we could pull that question up from the audience here? Let's see.
How do we get information or a template to help get a monitoring service?
Okay. I think there's some of that on the H-GAC website. Or we could, Aaron, that's something we could certainly follow up. There's no shortage of examples. We'll send out to H-GAC and you can provide that. That's certainly something that's very easy to provide some ready examples.
Yeah, and there's actually FEMA just updated their monitoring guidance.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Last year before, they just put, and it actually has a sample scope of work for a debris monitoring firm in it in the very, very back. So that could be a really helpful tool for you. Just look up FEMA and debris monitoring. And
another comment, I think echoing, I'd say, something that says Valerie Blanton teaches that in the G202. I think it's a full day almost on debris monitoring and how to do it, what's involved, all those things. So again, one more plug for that course there as you prepare for debris generating events. So there we go. All right.
Okay, good. Okay, so of course you want to bring emergency management in on anything like that for doing a emergency plan or debris management plan. They can help as far as managing the resources. Incident command, you want to make sure your debris management plan fits in with your other plans that the jurisdiction has and fits in with your emergency management plan, that all fits together and works together. Also GIS for mapping jurisdictional boundaries, areas of hazards, progress of debris operations. They can be a really helpful group as far as helping you to see where the hazards are and the progress that's been made. And then communications and public affairs, talked about the public information piece is really important. So having them at the table, because of course, if you've had a large debris generating incident, chances are you're going to be dealing with a whole lot of other things as well. Maybe they're going to be setting up shelters for people. Maybe they're doing, giving out ice and food and water. And so all those messages need to be put together, and so they can provide those messages in a way that fits in with everything else that's going on. And then, of course, finance, because you got to track all your costs, make sure you get reimbursed. So it's really important that they be at the table and know what's going on, and you have some means to track your cost and your hours and equipment use and all those things, so you can get reimbursed.
The GIS, I want to tell you, GIS, I mean, again, 10, 15 years ago during Hurricane Ike, you were putting out GIS maps. It's like the equivalent of playing Pong. That is what we were dealing with. Our Atari, that sort of thing. Now you should see some of the maps and some of the things that can be done with your own resources or contractor resources. You can just tell a story, and you have elected officials or you talked about how important, in Collier County in Southwest Florida, people were eating it up like catnip. You were just loved it. People love the information, and a lot of it goes to the GIS. So bringing them there, understanding what resources you have. You are at the next level, and you're able to integrate it with debris management. We've seen some really cool stuff there.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of work has been done in that area, and sometimes your contractors can also provide some real helpful assistance. We'll show some of that in a little bit. Building inspections, so conducting inspections of buildings and residences. You're getting an idea of the damage that's been done, and also in your recovery, doing the build, making sure that the reconstruction meets building codes. And then public health, sometimes you'll need a letter from your health authority to say that the threat does pose a threat to the public, and the debris poses a threat to the public. And so, that's important to have them lined up and understanding their role, and also the environmental folks. So you're looking at debris management sites and coordinating with TCEQ and others on doing testing and for those debris management sites, doing baseline sampling and sampling afterwards to make sure you've cleaned it up is going to be really important. And then purchasing is, you're going to need resources, and also getting those contractors lined up, making sure that they understand what their role is in the process as well. So some other stakeholders, of course, we've talked about contractors, your debris hauler for clearing, collection and disposal of debris, making sure you have those lined up ahead of time. We talked about those pre-position contracts, really important to have if you don't have them already. The debris monitor, I talked a little bit about what they do, but they're going to be documenting the collection and disposal of debris, where it goes. Also certifying the trucks, so you have an idea of the volumetric capacity of each truck, so the drivers can be paid. And then your regular trash hauler, just to keep them in mind in this process as well. Debris hauler companies don't pick up regular trash. They can only pick up what is generated from the disaster. And so the regular trash collection has to be continued. And so they kind of have to work in concert with the trash, the debris collection. And then your volunteer agencies. So, sometimes the volunteer agencies just show up, and they will have different ones, different organizations have come to the area after a disaster to, and some of them have like specialties, like some of them will do mucking out houses. They specialize in that. Some of them specialize in putting together clothing and those kind of things. So these volunteer agencies can really be put to work and help those residents who may not be able to get the debris out to the curb themselves. Also, if you can track those volunteer agencies, their staff, their their hours and their activities. You can use that for potential also to help meet your match as far as that's needed for your reimbursement.
I could say something about the trash haulers, Brian. I think for those smaller events, having the trash hauler there brought to the table is a really viable solution. Especially those lemon twig events, if you were, or leaf and pine needle events. You may have to bring them involved in the volunteer agencies, bringing them to the table. They just, like you said, they just show up. They just show up. They could come from, Minnesota, Missouri, the moon, who knows where they come from, but they're here and they want to help. And that help sometimes even gets in the way. So understanding, and I know we've done some things with H-GAC about volunteer organizations and how best to work with them, train them, and make sure that they're a benefit to the debris operation, I think is a benefit to your whole community.
Yeah, there's actually some really helpful information on the H-GAC website. There's some tools there that if you do have volunteers, there's a flyer you can give them to help understand their role and where the right of way is and that kind of information. So there's some very helpful information on the website.
Maybe at the break, we're about to take a break in about 30 minutes or so. Maybe at the break, we can go to the H-GAC website, walk them through it, make sure everybody is familiar with it and some of the resources that are on there, pointing people there.
Mm-hmm. So I mentioned earlier about road clearance priorities, making sure you had those identified in the plan. So, identifying those critical roads with access to fire stations, police stations, hospitals, nursing facilities, pump stations, like so your water facilities, your wastewater facilities, all those kind of areas where you need to get to make sure they're functioning for the community, and then other utilities like power. I know that in some jurisdictions, they'll have the cleanup crews, the clearance crews go with the power crews, and they kind of work in together. So when they clear the roads, the power crews can get through and try to restore the power as quickly as possible. So coordinating with them on the response can help the recovery go much quicker. And then plan activation. So we've done all the planning piece, and then you have to activate the plan. So I think
Nick, there you go.
I'm gonna hand it off to you.
All right, so this slide is basically, starting your emergency roadway debris clearance. I mean, in this phase, you would, as a municipality, be coordinating with your debris contractor resources, your debris monitor, as well as your internal staff to get that debris clearance up and running. In this period of time, really, we're talking about initial push work, just clearing right-of-ways. You may be doing that with your internal force account crews or your hired debris haulers. Next slide. The Public Assistance State of Texas Assessment Tool, or PSTAT, is a survey tool which TDM is hosting. Allows local jurisdiction to capture photos, locations, estimates of damaged facilities. Some folks are also, capturing initial debris locations, debris quantities with that information. That information is rolled up to the state and eventually to FEMA. The point here is really trying to hit that federal disaster declaration threshold, which in the state of Texas is about 52 million now.
52. Yeah, I think 52. Or Valerie, if you're online, you have that handy dandy.
It's right around 52. I'm not good with every number, but that one I'm pretty sure.
So 52, let me tell you, 52, you got to want it to get to 52, folks. It's really important. This PSTAT tool, which came out Winter Storm Uri, which was a couple, 3 years ago, has really benefited, the state to get that information. And I'll say, again, emerging trends that, the FEMA and, to get that presidential disaster declaration, you're going to need to know what is, really what the opportunity is and what that information is. And pushing that forward to FEMA is a really, really important part here.
On that note, I mean, your first threshold is meeting that county threshold, right?
Sure.
Which is different for everybody in the state of Texas based on population.
Roughly 51.7.
What'd I say? 52.
52. You get both showcases or good job.
So hitting that mark. And of course, we usually advise people that in this FEMA process, it may go this route, right? It may go, what is the damage date? What is the damage value at to exceed the county threshold, then the state threshold? But of course, FEMA you could have a bad enough disaster and, the money is, or the thresholds don't come into play and just the disaster declaration is issued. But going back to the city of Austin, just real quick, I mean, that is, again, we saw that months to get to that point. And it's because, the state and FEMA were really, what they said, validating all those municipal costs and damages to get to that number.
So I mean, at some point you're gonna, they were searching in the couch cushions for damages. I mean, they were looking for that, those nickels and quarters that your kid dropped in there a couple of years ago to find it, to get over that threshold. And it certainly is a important piece of this, and one that, a bridge you might have to overcome. So yeah, we got truck search.
Truck search. So truck search is another really big, important step, especially in the monitoring aspect of this job and the debris hauler collection. So, your contractor's bringing in the trucks. It's always good to identify a staging location. Sometimes contractor may have one, know where they're going to go for staging, or, it's good for a municipality to have, a park site or a big parking lot that can be used just to get those assets in. Your monitoring company would begin the truck certification, which is basically measuring all of the trucks and certifying the carrying capacity of that hauling unit. So in this case, you see what we usually see in the industry, big box truck. A lot of times that particular truck will have an additional hauling unit on a trailer, making what we call the double barrel hauling unit, which together is about the most efficient thing you could have on your project. As an example, the placard that's shown on the bottom left shows that truck is certified for 78 cubic yards. And so you can imagine if you had another trailer behind it, you're going to be above, 100, 150
Easily, yeah.
cubic yards together with that one loading unit. So in terms of efficiency, that's really what you want.
So can you go back there just so it makes sure everybody's clear? In that bottom right-hand photo, so when we're measuring this, you got to take this box, and then you got to make this box right here, and then you got to make that triangle right there. And then there may be something right there that you have to deduct, right?
Correct.
So, I mean, I'm not good with numbers either. And
not exactly a simple process.
no,
right?
It's not a simple process at all. So it's not just, thumb up in the air. I mean, you're out there, people are measuring it and adding this, taking this, dividing quadratic equation, calculus.
To John's point too. Okay. So the importance here is, this is the foundation of the monitoring process, because as you know, you may have debris contracts that are cubic yard based. So your contractor's getting paid for a certain volume of material that they bring to disposal or to a DMS site for processing. And so the monitor is making basically a load call based on the certification of that truck or the hauling unit. And so everything kind of rolls up from there in terms of data analysis and cost. And you can't just take, let's say you have a standard dump truck come in and the dump truck has a label on it that says that's a 25 cubic yard box. You can't just take that information because, people modify their trailer equipment and, increase the volume of the carrying capacity. And so that's why FEMA says it has to be basically measured and certified.
So that you mean to tell me, Nick, that doesn't come off the showroom floor looking like that?
Well, no, I don't
Monster
think so.
Garage.
Yeah, that is Jamie would know better than I, but that's probably a custom fabricated box.
Oh yeah, they're custom fabricating anything, everything. It's no two of these are the same, really, right? No two of them. Absolutely.
All right, so moving into your initial 2 days to 2 weeks recovery operation, you're looking at, establishing the DMS locations. Really want to hit on that because I don't know, I guess in my experience, I'm a big fan of DMS sites to maximize efficiency, especially in urban areas. But that is not to say that they're not important in rural locations as well. So your two issues are really going to be, in urban areas, you got the large population, you're probably far, you got, you need to look at how far it is from debris collection to final disposal. And typically, I mean, let's take Houston, for example. You're going to sit in traffic to get a truck to a landfill, driving 30 miles in traffic, not making any progress. And so debris management sites, close to the damaged locations really maximize your productivity. And again, in rural locations too, you may be going 60, 70 miles to a disposal site. And so you need to be able to, try to get that debris out of affected areas, process it, reduce it, and then get it to the disposal. Prioritizing roads for debris collection, et cetera, et cetera. Really, you're ramping up the operation in this time frame. That is probably the most important thing I can say is you're trying to get the operation started with your contractor or your internal assets and basically continue the efficiency from there.
Nick, this is what I would probably say is the hot water phase for the debris manager, because nothing looks like it's moved. Everything looks like it did during day one. And I mean, I don't know, you've been there. You're trying to convince, hey, we're moving things, you're elected officials. I mean, what would you say to the folks out there? I mean, again, having done this on both sides of the table here.
Well, the best thing that you can do is bring the right resources to the table and get the job started. That's our goal, right? That's
Trucks rolling, right?
Goal. Yeah. I mean, you want to see those assets coming into town, getting them set up, rolling, certified, and get them picking up debris. And the longer that it takes you to do that is where, let's take any event, maybe Harvey as an example. Within that first week of a resident being able to get back into their house and gut the house or get debris to the right of way is when then you will hit this time frame of really having a mass debris problem in the community, right? Sometimes that can be like instantly, sometimes it can be in the first week. And that's when really your political pressure will start to ramp up on what are we doing? What's the status?
Well, this is also
trucks.
They want to see them. They want to see it. But this is okay. So we call this hot water period because this is what we found. A lot of people make decisions that get them in hot water. 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years from that date. So and Nick, I know you've seen those too. I mean, this is where contracts get changed, shenanigans, tomfoolery, all those sorts of things. That happens during this phase because of that, the desire to get things going. I mean, and I don't know, Nick, you've been a part of them and you've overcome them before. So any advice, anything you'd say there?
I've never had any hot water issues. I don't know.
Oh man, let me step away a little bit further away. No, it is a challenge. Every disaster is different, right? I mean, that's not a cliche. They just happen to be. Everyone poses usually a unique problem that I've found. They all have something. Yeah, they all have people passed away. You have the commercial
the obstacle to get over.
Everything, you're right. Every disaster has kind of that.
What I would say is, however you address the challenges that you're facing, and if in the case of, let's say contract modifications are needed, documenting that,
right?
Documenting your steps, right, wrong, or indifferent, but to have the justification for why you as a municipality took the steps that you did to expend X, Y, and Z costs. And that I think is probably the most important thing.
Don't try to hide it, I think is what you're trying to say.
I mean, everybody's got a city, county attorney.
That's right.
Purchasing agent or whoever's, in charge of purchasing. And there's procedures for emergency procurement. So if you need to go, let's say you don't have a debris hauling standby contract or a debris monitoring contract, and just working through the steps to get you to the right place and documenting those decisions.
I think, yeah, that's a really important note for everybody here in especially those who are remote is stuff happens during the first 2 weeks that you can't plan for. But if you make the right decisions, get the right people at the table, get the, the attorneys, the state, everybody involved, and don't, try to do it under cover of night, you'll be in good shape.
So then we really move into, activity is occurring. You've got trucks starting the collection process. You got your debris monitoring company monitoring the contracted collection activities. I'll speak to, using an automated debris management system, which is something that we do. We basically have an online GIS system. I think later on in the slides, we're going to demo part of that for you. But where you come in to this is really working with your debris monitoring company and your debris collection company and establishing, your city county boundaries, your zones. If you want to have areas divvied up like that, they don't have to be. They can be as simple as your boundaries, your political boundaries, your precinct boundaries, maintenance camps, however you want to do it. And basically we track everything electronically through this process using handheld automated devices. We have a system and provide that data back to the client, showing truck locations, where debris activity is occurring. And this is also, the reports are given, FEMA usually has access to this, or Army Corps of Engineers folks are usually in the region performing technical assistant for FEMA. And so this is information that, not only you would have access to or should have access to, but also the other stakeholders that are working in the region. And just in terms of data and, high level reporting metrics.
Again, I mean, you talk about Hurricane Ike. I mean, everything was in bankers boxes and load tickets were actually something you could touch and feel. Now it's really everything online, everything through the web portals and, the ARC viewers and all that sort of stuff. That's really where things have gone. And it's really a standard throughout the process, throughout the disaster industry. Certainly can be done, and, fall back on that manual process, but something that is definitely a benefit out there and a benefit to you.
Let's talk about white goods collection for a second. White goods are basically, appliances, refrigerators, stoves, if you're not familiar with the term white good. So it's important to have, line items for these special debris classifications in your hauling contract. In my experience, typically you would deal with white goods, not as an immediate priority. Okay. I think Jamie's in here, he'd probably agree. And usually in communities I've seen, these will almost dispose of themselves. Okay. Except for, and let me explain what I mean by that. But, in Houston and Hurricane Harvey, we had literally, people come by with trailers and load these up and they would go recycle them. They were basically, collecting this to go get the salvage value out of a white good. What won't dispose of itself is the freezer full of bait or chicken or beef that has been left on the curb and was never emptied out. And unfortunately, that's always a fun one for the debris company hauling company to have to deal with.
You don't forget that smell.
No,
You don't forget that first smell of you have that smell. Oh man. Yeah, no, it's definitely a challenge there.
yeah. So last thing I'll say here is, for the refrigerators and freezers that may have Freon in it, you want to make sure that the Freon was removed and disposed of via recycling facility, and that everything goes to a permitted recycling or disposal location. Electronic waste, similarly, not necessarily a rush. It's always separated from the rest of the collection activity. You may have a contract that has the requirements or the pay items for electronic debris removal. Typically, as a standard practice, we want to see that those materials go to recycling. Household hazardous waste, another big one. This is one that, you really want to try to focus on with messaging and separation. So let's use the example of an impacted neighborhood community. Maybe everything was flooded, and guess what's going to come out of the garage? All the gasoline, paints, pesticides. Not exactly something that you really want sitting on the right of way in the residential area. And what I mean by that is with children or the public, being in that area, we don't want those chemicals out there on the street. We also don't want them to be mixed in with the pile of vegetation that your contractor is going to pick up and take to a DMS site, because then we need to, somebody needs to be able to separate that out to meet the DMS environmental requirements and that sort of thing. So again, just trying to message with the community about how you're going to handle that collection, and maybe not rushing everything out, onto the street curbside, if we can avoid that.
Well, what do you think? I mean, on this, Nick, I mean, again, you being on county government side, I know there's a lot of opportunities to do citizen collection station and household events and that sort of thing. That seems to be, again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how that may be integrated into a debris program instead of having it on the curve with Roundup and
that's a great
toys and chemicals and all that.
So maybe we've got folks in the audience that have their own HHW facilities or collection programs, and having, messaging to the community about how to bring that material to your facilities for collection. Or maybe you've got a contract with a HHW company to provide certain events, and could, do that on like a standalone, or have a separate collection day for that material to get it to you. And then the last one I've seen is, public drop-offs. So
Sure.
Having a location where, you have the folks, your residents bring that to you. Maybe it's at a certain park. Cheryl, yes, ma'am.
Repeat the question.
Great question. I mean, that's
gotta
a role
repeat it,
of
though,
your
so these
debris
people-
monitoring company. What's that?
No, you got to repeat it.
Oh, repeat. They want me to repeat Cheryl's question.
Yeah.
Her question was, how do you track that collection from, let's say, resident to a HHW collection event? And how do you save that documentation for FEMA reimbursement? So my answer is that's a perfect thing for your debris monitoring company to do. Let's say it's residents coming to the HHW collection. We can help track that with, informational logs or iPads, even taking information from the resident, everything from, name, address. Some communities may want to verify like that this is in Galveston County and the resident is in Galveston County, that sort of thing. And then just simple data collection on what are they bringing. And so we've been involved in doing that for, communities really across the Gulf Coast. Could be, I know when we were down in Collier County for Ian, Collier County actually had multiple HHW collection locations. And so we had monitors there that would basically work with the staff on tracking the material that's coming in. And then it's just, how did you pay, for disposal and that sort of thing.
So we got a comment here from Cheryl Burton Fentress.
Oh my gosh, Cheryl Burton.
Yes. So she actually, we're going to read her comments here because I think they are really important. It's how great it is to advertise prior to hurricane season, how to separate these items and after an event, or bringing them to your locations prior to the season. And that you would have a separate contractor and work closely with them and train your staff how to collect them and document them at the HHW collection events. So, hey, I couldn't agree with that more. I think the biggest thing here is to make sure that you've got a plan. And with that, I tell you what, before we get into the long-term recovery, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break. It's been about an hour and a half. Thank you so much for being here in person. I appreciate you all being here. For those of you on the remote, give us about 5 minutes. We got cookies, you don't, and we're going to take a quick break and be right back. Okay. All right. We're going to get everything back up and running here. Are we on, I guess. I think. Okay. Sorry, we're gonna. Trying to think welcome, Mr. Warner. Good to see you. And what's that? We're live. Okay. Got a lot of folks here virtually joining us. We appreciate it. From all different places in all different kind of locations. So for those of you who are phone calling in or part of the Zoom meeting, we really appreciate it. So I'm going to turn it back over to Nick, talk about the long haul, 2 weeks out, 1 month,
No
which is
problem.
really not that long at all
No.
in debris years.
You know, one thing to kick this back off is to really talk for a second about the duration of these debris removal activities, right? So this typically is not a short, fast, and quick process, unless, as John described earlier, about the pine trees or pine needles and leaves type cleanup event, which we would all love to have. So this is, you're going to be at least probably 3 to 4, 5, 6 months into, special debris removal programs, like especially like PPDR, private property debris removal, that sort of thing. So, in this time frame of 2 weeks to 1 month, you're continuing to ramp up your right-of-way cleanup operation. You might be getting into parks debris removal, leaner hanger stump programs, depending on how you and your debris contractor want to phase those types of operations. And really continuing your discussions with the state and FEMA. What else could I say here? Beginning probably your private property gated community, so private gated street debris collection, or looking at how to phase that in, and communicating your progress of debris removal activity with your key stakeholders, local government officials, and the residents. So that's really an important thing to do. It's important to let the community know about how many passes are you going to do in your community, and when might the last pass or the last set out date be. And so what I mean by that, if you're not aware, is major events usually you'd have like 1, 2, and 3 being the final pass. We've seen different methods of messaging this to the community, right? So in the early days, you may have power, cell phone communication challenges, signage helps, or posting messages in various communication channels helps to help get that word out. Hey, debris removal is starting here soon or underway, and we will be in your area multiple times. That really helps. Looking back at ADMS, information on tracking truck locations, this is really good to do, and really powerful information for your community, showing you and your decision makers where your debris contractor equipment is and how it's making its progress through the community. Next slide. Stump removal. Okay, so you got your leaner hanger and stump removal project activity. So stump removal is removal of a stump and filling the root ball hole. That's eligible if 50% or more of the root ball is exposed. And then you get into grinding the stump in place as eligible activity. Recovery, so 1 month to 3 months, maintaining and evaluating your right-of-way cleanup, vegetative and construction and demolition debris. Let's say there's multiple DMS or debris management sites being used in the community. At some point, as that debris is being processed and reduced, then your contractor is going to start to initiate haul out, which is haul out of debris from the DMS to its final disposal. And so if it's vegetative debris, the chips may go to various permitted mulching facilities or as beneficial use, landfill cover, or in certain states, you can land apply ground vegetative debris as a soil amendment. And again, continuing your progress of community discussions with FEMA, the state, and your impacted residents. Next slide. Special debris recovery operations. So again, leaning tree and dangerous hanging limb removal. This is, something you do with specialized contracting equipment, bucket trucks that your contractor may bring in. We call them our bucket crews that are really going to get into the trimming aspect and the cutting of dangerous limbs and hazardous trees. Usually the debris hauling contracts, have pay items based on the size of the cut or the size of the limb, and your debris monitoring company would be there to basically document all of that activity through its process of, pre-cut photos, the tree or the hazard in relation to the right of way. So looking at the picture on the left, you clearly see that tree is split. It is in the right of way, and its damaged limb is basically in the roadway, and the whole tree needs to be removed. And so taking those, post-cut photos as well, and documenting basically the pay items for that work that's being performed there.
I'll tell you, for those of you who are again here and on the phone, virtually, this one is definitely one of the most well-documented components of the debris management process. And I cannot stress that enough. I mean, being able to demonstrate and clearly the best picture that this one has is the one on the left side, your left, my left, whatever it is. It's the one where the tree is, you could clearly see how it is a threat to the public health and safety. FEMA wants to see that. FEMA exactly wants to see this tree, this pay item, this $800 tree, $1,000 tree, that whatever it's going to be removed is a threat to public health and safety. We've dealt with that on several occasions here recently, making sure, so we want to stress that to everybody. Make a little note there. Make sure you're getting those photographs of it as a threat to the public right away. FEMA's recently amended their guidance on this, and I think it's, again, certainly something we're going to see evolve.
So then we get into just an example of tracking that in terms of, leaner hanger cut work data in a automated debris management system. So this is showing you basically the locations basically of where all that work was performed. That's something that you would expect from your debris monitoring company. And then parks and recreational areas, debris removal. Those can be your city-owned parks or parks where you as a municipality have a maintenance responsibility. Next slide. Obviously, in those locations, you may get into a lot of the leaner hanger work. That's something that happened in City of Austin and many other communities that are impacted like that. Private property debris removal. These are special programs. You'd only do this with FEMA or approval with FEMA. And you might get into something like this where, the entire house was destroyed, probably typical in the tornado events that we were looking at earlier, or wildfire type impacts where basically, the house is gone, everything's on private property, and your debris hauler contractor is there basically to remove that debris from private property only with, right of entry from the property owner and what's the word I'm looking for? All liability, liability, hold harmless stipulations in place to protect you, the municipality, the contractor, and the federal government.
So this is also known as PPDR, okay? PPDR, and if you're not saying it as fast as I am, PPDR, then you don't know how to do it, okay? So if you don't know how to say PPDR and you're gonna say it this long, then you should ask somebody to help you, because this is really dangerous. You're going onto people's property. It's expensive. If you're not, again, I'm joking there halfway a little bit, but if you're not able and you don't know what PPDR means, then you're the guy in the room that needs some help. All right.
Yeah,
So I can't
This
stress
is
that enough.
not something that you do without having a lot of discussions.
Oh,
about
yeah,
it.
you got to discuss. a
Not
lot of
something you
discuss.
do on day one, and definitely not something you do with your contractor or your, can't tell you how to run your community business, but you typically wouldn't do it with your own force account staff either. So not something you get involved with when you're just pulling debris, off the right of way and running that initial collection process. So again, we kind of talked about this. Jurisdictions need to have that written request to FEMA before private property debris removal can begin. You need to document the immediate threats, legal responsibility, and have the indemnities in place.
So this guy, the federal guy or gal, whoever it is, federal coordinating officer is the grand poobah of your disaster. And this has got to go all the way up to him. This doesn't have to just go to Johnny FEMA guy. This doesn't have to go to just a regular state person. And this has to be approved by the FCO. They are the person that is ultimately in charge of this disaster. So, I mean, again, when you're talking about this, it's next level, higher order type of things that you need to have a lot of considerations on. And, again, these are some of those right here.
Yeah, so having the right of entry, the hold harmless agreement, also making sure that you've got photos, private property debris removal assessment, and documentation of environmental and historical review. One thing that I'll also speak to is private property or private gated.
Yeah,
street.
great. Yep, that's right.
Okay, so, in some instances, the municipality may need or may want and choose basically to go into your private streets areas, your gated communities, and perform debris removal. And sometimes FEMA's not right there with you early on in the event when you need to do that. So, working with your consultants on how to document the life, health, and safety, taking pre-work photos, maybe making estimates on how much debris is there can help you should you decide to go into those areas prior to having, FEMA dot the I, cross the T, do an inspection kind of thing.
You know who lives in those gated communities? Thurston and Lovey Howe. Thurston and Lovey Howe lives there. The Kardashians. And we know all the Kardashians. They're crazy. Okay. So there's, real housewives of your town live in those gated communities. So they're going to want service. And they are also very loud, very important folks that you're going to have to, deal with it, especially in the big disasters. So waterways.
Waterway debris removal, also a special program. Let's see. Looking back to Harvey, I know in Houston, Harris County, the communities here have had waterway debris removal programs, something that, flood control district has been involved in a lot. You may have work items for this in your hauler contract, or, you may have a separate debris removal contract specifically for those waterway programs. I also know, typically you're dealing with, you may be dealing with the Army Corps of Engineers or the NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service, as that third-party sponsor.
But you know what waterways is? Waterways is expensive. Anytime anything touches the water, it's expensive. So be careful with these things. I mean, that looks expensive right there. That just looks like a lot of money to clean that up. I mean, that is not just something easy. It's got environmental things. It just, I don't know. It looks like I can hear the cash register just jingling right now. That's what we're dealing with there. Oh, you lost a mic down. Okay.
Got a mic down.
Oh, you
All
can.
right.
Well, that
So
one sounded good.
recovery activities, 3 months to project completion. Again, you're continuing that right-of-way collection process. Your monitoring firm should be looking at ineligible debris on the right-of-way. An example of this might be, the garbage or household garbage that we talked about and not picking that up, or not picking up, reconstruction debris later on in the process from a contractor being in a house and maybe he or she's getting paid to dispose of dispose of that debris from the reconstruction, but is trying to place it on the right of way. And completing the disposal of the reduced debris from your DMS sites to final disposal, closeout and remediation of the DMS locations. And lastly, just conducting your project closeout meetings with FEMA and other agencies. Let's talk about reporting for a little bit, because this has really changed a lot in the last few years. If you think back to like when we had Hurricane Ike in the region, a lot of this data collection was all paper load tickets. There wasn't the GIS systems that we were talking about earlier. And so there's been a lot of advancements. One of the things that we can do is really track a lot of different types of information about that debris collection process. So this is showing you an example of kind of a standard report that we send out, but it basically has, debris volume in cubic yards collected by the contractor. You can look at different metrics based on the debris types to DMS sites or multiple DMS sites, and just showing you how that progress is being made over time. John mentioned earlier using Power BI. This is an example of that Power BI dashboard. And so we, typically in our process have our team that would have access to the Power BI dashboard, as well as the municipal staff. And then your contractors receiving, snapshots of this information over time as well. So really a lot has changed in the last few years. Moving into part 3, debris management sites. I think we're going to spend a little bit of time here on those. So you should probably know by now that a DMS site, and these have different names in different states, but is basically a temporary location where debris is stored and reduced before recycling or disposal. Just to sort of touch on the benefits of these again is really looking at, how to expedite debris removal in your community. They may not always be needed, but in a pinch or a very large, disaster, a debris generating event, you may find yourself, or your contractor may find yourself in need of these types of locations. So one of the things that we like to do in our pre-planning meetings with our clients is to talk about, hey, do you have you identified, debris management sites, or what does your debris management plan say about debris management sites? And as you know, and we've talked about before, the land use in your community may be changing. So a site you used 10 years ago might be developed now, and that sort of thing. So really just working with your contractor on, suitable temporary locations where debris can be stored, or maybe you have parks or, some county property somewhere that hadn't been developed that is good just for a backup planning tool.
It's a beauty right there.
Yeah, that's a great picture.
Hashtag no filter.
So a lot going on in this one. You wanna talk
Lots
about
of
it?
going on.
You want to talk about it?
Oh, no. You were there.
All right. So let's see what's going on in this photo. So obviously you've got a large quantity of mulch that has been processed on the right? You've got trucks that are being loaded probably for haul out from this DMS site to final disposal. The green scissor lift here in the front of this picture with a monitoring staff in that is making a load call on the quantity of debris that's in this truck that's leaving the site. So again, there's a lot that occurs at these DMS sites in terms of, truck equipment that's coming in, your contractors, management of the debris that's coming there, and then basically the grinding and reduction operation, and then haul out. So you can have obviously multiple pieces of equipment working, multiple trucks lined up coming in, and just a lot of personnel and equipment.
So I love this picture because it really shows honestly, I think it's a beautiful picture. One of the most dangerous places that you have in the debris operation. I mean, people are dying left. No, I'm kidding. People dropping like flies. No, I mean, you got, you got a lot of trucks moving. I mean, Nick, I know you're a health and safety guy. You're the Mr. Health and Safety. I mean, this is something definitely you got to get your people out there. I think they could catch on fire. Somebody could fall in the scissor lift. You might have a truck hit the thing. I mean, there's so many things that could
Yeah,
happen.
you're right. So, I mean, we, as a monitoring company, really make sure we implement our health and safety protocols, and that our health and safety officer actually visits every one of the debris sites that we are involved in. In terms of your tower or scissor lift type of setup for staff that are in that, we follow the wind safety guidelines for that particular scissor lift equipment and however it's rated. So, if wind exceeds the limitation of that equipment, then we can't work, or if you get bad weather, then you can't work. And as John mentioned, I mean, working with your contractor staff on their health and safety protocols as well, because they're typically running this site, looking at issues like, okay, so you've got a lot of debris here. Fire prevention is a big thing, and fire suppression. And as material sits at these types of sites, even if it's C&D or vegetation, that material will heat up. And in a lot of communities, we see as these events progress, then typically, concerns shift from getting material there to, well, how much material is here and what do we need to do for fire mitigation activities? So as we mentioned in that photo, here's another example of that load tower. So again, you may have a standalone facility like this built out of wood or scaffolding, or we use scissor lifts that are adequate for outdoor use. And they are basically making load calls at this location on the trucks that are bringing debris in, as well as verifying empty loads as the truck leaves. And this is an important part of the monitoring process. In our experience, usually when you look at who else might be at this debris management site, you're going to have, regulatory inspections. You're going to have, can have a FEMA representative stop by periodically. And the last big piece is Corps of Engineers as a technical representative for FEMA. They will be all over these debris management site locations and looking at how the monitoring personnel are grading those loads, as well as following trucks back out into the community to watch them conduct debris removal operations. So that's typically what we see. So unloading debris, typical examples here. Again, making sure that those trucks are empty when they leave is a really important part of the process, as well as debris separation and segregation. So in the instance where you might have, the inadvertent collection of like, a HHW or something like that into the truck. And then if you see it come out of the truck at the site, just separating that material from the rest of the debris volume. Stockpiled debris, again, this is a contractor process here to really manage that material at the site, keep things under control. Windrowing is typically how we see material stockpiled and spread out. And again, as things go along, looking at how to minimize fire incidents. And speaking of fire, so fire or burning isn't acceptable, and in many communities, a standard debris reduction practice. What we would say here is, and it's very efficient. So usually you'd have a contractor bring in air curtain incinerators to blow and to keep that fire hot, reduce smoke impacts. But this is maybe not something that's for everyone, right? And what I mean by that is, hey, when Hurricane Ike was here, I know we had at least one or two burning sites in the region. But as you get into really some of the urban areas, it's something that what I've noticed is not every community wants to entertain. They would rather just, grind, reduce, and haul out material. Out in the rural areas, hey, you may be
Giddy up.
Giddy up.
Giddy up. Giddy up.
Maybe-
Burning that debris. I
maybe
mean,
it's
let's
more
go.
open to that.
It is, that's true. That's one of those things that you often see in those rural areas, and it just gets the job done. I mean, right conditions, all those things, chipping and grinding. Yep, big stuff there.
Recycling. So, in the case of maybe you do have some private property debris removal that's occurring, or you've got various metal and stuff that's been collected in the right of way, that is something that can be diverted from the waste stream. As well as your ground wood chips. And I would say that's probably the most standard thing that we see in terms of recycling is ground vegetative debris that goes from grinding to, mulching facilities and is eventually aged enough to be sold as a mulch product. Site selection. So considerations, let's talk about this. So maybe you're at that point in your community where you're looking at debris management sites. Your option might be, of some privately owned facilities that would be good, or some that you publicly own. The advantage of using something you already have, obviously, is probably reducing the cost of you or your contractor's expense to lease or tie up a privately owned piece of property, right? An agreement is often in place, between either you or your contractor to use that facility as a DMS. So it's definitely very common across the country to see a mix of both, something that's publicly owned and something that's privately owned.
Places not to go, the floodplain. Other places not to put these, the floodway. I know some people try to put site one next to a school. I mean, we might as well put one in a daycare. I mean, it's not, you got to be careful, folks, is what I'm trying to say. In this one, at least 5 acres. I don't know. You've seen the Corps of Engineers. It says 100 acres. 100 acres. I mean, look, Winnie the Pooh can find the 100-acre wood. For us to find 100 acres here is a challenge. So I think 5 is, hey, we're cooking with grease at that point, and we're able to get some things done.
Yeah. So as John mentioned, in high population density locations, you would want to try to avoid inconveniencing, maybe a residential area that's close by, finding things that are a little bit further out. But again, one benefit is just, having something that's in proximity to your major debris impact, which again helps to expedite that process.
One of the things also to think about is the not being exclusive or making sure that you're looking holistically throughout your community and not targeting certain areas or certain populations. FEMA has recently instituted considerations for low to moderate income population, in increasing diversity, equity, inclusion into your debris programs, and just really the recovery process altogether. There's been several lawsuits about targeting and making sure, and it always happens as part of solid waste siting, that sort of thing. So just to be mindful of that as you evaluate, identify, select sites, making sure that you look at a whole community approach and not just, looking at one geographic area.
Great points. Another good one would be how your contractor or you will ingress and egress, basically how you're going to get the equipment in there. Does it have good road access? Is it always wet? Is it in the floodplain? Things that you want to stay away from if you've got this piece of property and you go out there and it's full of wetlands and it's never dry, that's not probably a good place to be planning for your debris management site to be. Adherence to local, state, federal rules, regulations, and ordinances. The biggest thing here is really following your state and local guidelines for, basically alternative solid waste procedures. We're going to talk about the TCEQ permitting a little bit, but you may have in your community also fire marshal or fire management regulations that come into play, and so working with those types of people on these sites and the requirements to follow is a really good practice. Another one is proximity to natural running water or potable water wells in Texas. I know that that's something the TCQ wants to look at, distance to water wells. And again, the ones that I know of in Texas are basically not having a wetland impact and not impacting streams that may be on the property. So looking at, how you would set up and organize these locations, this is a really good one to work with your debris contractor in terms of the specifics. In general planning terms, we mentioned site size and site location as good things, and just kind of, making sure that there's enough room to, get into the site, store your debris, reduce the debris, and leave that location. And contractors that you may have a contract with are really good at setting those operations up, and can take even a small piece of property and make it as efficient as it can be.
And, I like what you did say about using this as the guidepost. I think this is maybe the 100 acres piece. Again, I'll go back to that. I mean, again, Jamie, I don't know, you've done a lot of this. I don't know, realistically, 10, 15 acres, 100 acres, that's ideal, but I think that people have worked with a lot less. But I think this is a good tool as a roadmap, or, if you will, and working, to guide you, but not to just throw it out because, hey, we don't have 100 acres, we can't do this. Again, we're all trying to do more with less. This is an example of that.
The other thing I'll mention is it doesn't really happen. It's not an issue in Texas that I've seen, but some communities, to get an actual DMS permit, want you to provide, a layout graphic like this. And that's kind of hard to do without, working with a contractor and looking at the exact site. So at least, here in Texas, it's a little easier for us to get state permitting paperwork, done without necessarily having all the details like this, which, if you can imagine, coming up with a plan to how to run a DMS site is very easy to do once we've got the location ready to set up and go. And the contractors that typically do this know exactly how to set one of those up. Residential drop-off sites. So we're talking about this a little while ago in terms of household hazardous waste collection, but having a public drop-off site is a great tool for giving the public an option to not wait on you or that debris collection truck to come by the house, right? So sometimes, actually, it's pretty frequent now that we see residential collection sites be used in conjunction with a contractor DMS site. Typically those are separate areas or separate locations, but again, just giving the community another avenue to bring debris to is a good tool. Let's talk about DMS approvals for a minute. So in Texas, we go through the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality to get a debris management site approved. In Texas, they won't, you can't basically get the permit until the disaster is here and a declaration has been issued. Well, not before a declaration has been issued, because we had sites permitted in Austin, obviously prior to having that declaration. But the point is, you can't really pre-permit them as you can in certain states. So basically, TCQ has a form. You fill out the form, attach some supporting documents, and send that in and get your permit. What they're looking at is obviously what type of debris that you're going to want to store on the site, and what the reduction activity is going to be, if it's grinding versus burning, and that sort of thing.
And how many months is that permit good for, or that approval, or whatever term you want to use? How long is it good for, Nick?
I want to say like 3 to 4 months, but then you could get
you can get some extensions. It's what's important to know is you need to monitor this. You want to maintain compliance. You want to keep everybody happy. You don't want to get don't want to have any violations. You want to make sure that everything is, again, above board when it comes to TCQ and their environmental process. Oh, no, Valerie. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. No, let's see what Valerie said. Oh, Valerie. 90 days with 30 and 60-day extensions. Thank you. It's the new authorization. Oh, yes, there's a new authorization every incident. So that's a really important point. Just because you had one during Harvey doesn't mean it's going to be good now. It means it was good for Harvey. So
That's
thank
correct.
you for that clarification. That is really important. Really, really important point.
Yeah, yeah. So again, that's event specific. You know, it is a good thing if you had a site that was permitted before and you're going to use it again and then go back through that process, but you got to get the permit prior to using it. Another one that we wanted to highlight was getting your Texas Historical Commission review of that site. This actually is pretty easy to do. It's just sending a short form to the Texas Historical Commission and allowing their staff to review the site for any kind of historical or cultural resources. Pretty fast process, but an important one to make sure that's conducted. Why won't it advance?
Oh, hold on. That's because you got to do this, and now it'll going on.
All right, so what should we do now that we've got our permits in place and our contractor is going to start setting up? Basically, it's, you know, thoroughly documenting what's on this piece of property prior to beginning operations. So you can do that with, you know, videos, photographs, aerial photos or drone use, you know, just taking documentation, especially maybe if the municipality doesn't own this piece of property, documenting what it was before the operation started.
And one of the other items Valerie just chimed in was adding a topographical map to the THC. Or is that part of the short form?
It is something you should attach to that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Valerie. I think we should let her present with us. That would
I
be
know that
awesome.
would be fantastic. Got to get you down here, Valerie. Honestly, that part right here, this videotaping and photographing the site. We've seen some of our clients do regular videotaping and videotape. What kind of? We got to change that. No, we're not videotaping anymore. We're just videoing, videotaping. I still say that. I still say pulse machine.
Yeah,
I'll be honest. Who says?
We usually do this, like when we're involved in a debris operation, we do this periodically, if not daily, documenting activity at the site. And periodically we use drones.
Oh yeah,
to take-
drones. I mean, it's a really good way to have a record, and sometimes you can calculate volumes with it. They have all this neat stuff attached to it. I mean, I'm not a drone expert or anything, but we've certainly seen them in some very good instances be beneficial to making sure that you know what is going on at the sites, can see progress, that sort of thing.
So investigating the historical significance back to that point, that's something that we can do with background research, using basically cultural resource qualified staff to do some background investigation, make a topographic map or an aerial map, and basically send that information to the Texas Historical Commission.
There we go. Now you're back.
Another activity to perform before you start is soil and groundwater samples should be collected. Usually this is incorporated into debris hauling contracts or as a contractor responsibility, but not always the case. So just knowing what's in your contract and who's responsible to do that. A good best practice though, just to make sure that the site was restored and cleaned up properly prior to concluding your debris disposal operation.
So, you know, but one of the things, Nick, you've talked about this, so important because everybody, what did we talk about during that hot water period? Everybody wants to see trucks on the ground, people moving. And now you're telling me you got to get all this stuff done on these sites before I can get trucks moving. So what does that mean? I mean, what can you tell the folks out there to make sure that they are doing what A is going on? You do them concurrently, you do the sites first. I mean, what's the best practice here to make sure those trucks are running and everything's good?
Yeah. So, I mean, let's say your contractor's here, the debris activity is ramping up. You got your trucks being monitored, certified. Debris collection begins. Most of these contractors would be looking for a DMS site very early on, or the best case scenario is you already have one that was planned, and you have your DMS
There you go.
paperwork kind of ready to go. And so you can submit that stuff concurrently with, starting to set up that DMS site, get somebody to do some background sampling, which, doesn't.
That's pretty
take a lot
easy.
of
That's
time. Yeah,
readily
it's-
available
so,
and.
These activities really can happen pretty fast. It's just making sure that they're.
Okay, good. I just don't want the answer to be, well, we'll, shoot first, ask questions later type of thing. You got to get it done and it can move fast.
Post-event DMS remediation, as especially for sites that stored C&D or household hazardous waste, you would want to make sure that everything is cleaned up and remediated, restored to its original condition, and can take post-site assessment samples just to have that documentation on hand as well. Now we're into
Public information. All right. So we got about 45 minutes to do the last couple of parts here. We're going to be talking about public information and the financial impacts. Brian and I are going to work on this one together. I think that one is Lavalier is done. So, that I think one of the most important things here is the changing face of public information and how people consume news, how people consume information. Again, 82% of adults say that they often get their information. I think it's 100. Okay. Or it's pretty doggone close to 100. Whether it's television, radio, digital spaces, it's your Twitter sphere. I mean, Brian, I know you've done a lot of research on that. I mean, that's how people are getting stuff. How are you, when you're doing the planning process, how does that change the way you start planning for these debris incidents?
Yeah, so one of the things, since people are so used to going online and looking up information or going on their phone, a lot of times you can look at someone's website and go, wow, that hadn't been up in a while. But you can kind of count on people to go on the website to look for the most current information. And so that's kind of been a little bit of a shift now where people are more reliant on that kind of information, more so than the TV news like they used to. The Walter Cronkite days are kind of
oh man,
we still have a little, still have the TV news going on, and the local news can provide a good service. But for the most part, more people are relying on the digital platforms for their news than even the TV news anymore.
No, got to get those TikToks out. We got to get those TikToks for the debris operation too. That's what we're doing now as well. I'm bite-sized, 30 seconds, maybe too long.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you got to be able to have that and reach that audience in order to get this information out there.
Yeah, and so among the digital platforms, news websites or apps, so most people get their news that way. And so, making sure those websites are ready to go and provide current information is going to be really important, because that's where people are going to go first. Is they're going to go to your website, to your jurisdictional website, to say what's happening, what do I need to do? They'll be looking for instruction and status on the operation.
One of the things we've seen a lot here is setting up a disaster-specific website, and where you point everybody to that website during the recovery phase, where it's, somethingstrong.org or communityrecovers.edu or whatever it is. That's where you're pushing information. That's where you're pushing people, so that when that guy out there with that Shipley's donut, mug right there, having breakfast with that kolache is reading that news, that's where they need to go. And that website can be good for debris operations all the way to long-term recovery and housing.
Yeah, and you can also, besides just talking about debris and having the status of those operations, but also, having your recovery information and information about people seeking to recover and the need for permits and those kind of things could all be featured on the site and help the community recover much quicker. This is kind of scary. 31% of people say they get their news regularly from Facebook. And so
I think it's low. I think it's low. I still think it's low. I mean,
probably so.
I saw this on Facebook, Brian. I mean, listen, your mom's 92 years old and ordering DoorDash. That's Brian's mom ordering DoorDash.
She
92
does.
years old.
Yeah, she's all about
If
it.
mom's ordering DoorDash, people are getting their news from Facebook, is what I would say.
Mhm.
And you know what else is those, people are starting to do, like local communities, running Facebook ads for debris operations. People in Southwest Florida, in order to get good news about their debris operations, that local government was geofencing people. I'm not even from there. And I'm, scrolling in bed, you know how it is, that light's about to go out. And then I'm getting debris. Hey, how's your debris operation going in Lee County or whatever? I mean, seriously, just popped up. I didn't even know I was worried about Lee County's debris operation. That's true. So people are doing that and just leaning into it. So that's what I would say. Again, thank you all for being here and being remote. People are using creative ways to show people, I mean, even if it's subliminally, that their debris operations, trucks are out there, all that stuff. I mean, it ain't putting it on the front page of the newspaper,
And then there's Twitter. A lot of people use Twitter. And those people that use Twitter, 69% of those say they get their news from the site. So a lot of Twitter users and are using like I've got the National Hurricane Center on there. But that's also another source of information. So, all those tools you have that your jurisdiction has, that, if you have a Twitter account, a Facebook account, Instagram, people are going to be looking to those, and those are avenues to provide push information out there to them.
Maps, links, bite-sized pieces of information. I know we got something coming up here in a couple slides, but I mean, just everything through these, different modes, these different mediums of information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so of course, you're going to use some ideas for public information for debris management. Use the website, news media, all those contacts that you have. So some of the jurisdictions have municipal channels. I've seen those used very well, where they kind of do an interview with the debris manager or the emergency management coordinator, saying, so what should people be doing right now during this disaster with their debris, or asking other questions like that, and making a real informal kind of a like an interview type situation, and broadcasting that with their municipal channel. Also, of course, providing instructions to residents on the debris separation. We've talked about that, but that's really going to be important. Like John was saying, a few people will follow the instructions, and those that do, it'll really help speed up the recovery overall. And then, you don't want to sugarcoat things. You want to tell it like it is, that, hey, this is going to take a while. It's not going to go real quick. So provide realistic updates on what's going on with the debris operation, so people understand that it's not going to be right away. Also monitor the social media. There's some tools now that you can use to monitor social media, to look for comments, and pushing information out there is really important. Accurate, timely information about what's going on. If you don't push information out there, then people are going to start making stuff up and start posting it and getting people upset and confused, and then they'll be calling the local elected officials saying, hey, what's going on here? This is what I just read on Facebook. So make sure you're pushing out good information. And then exercising rumor controls. If you do see some information that's kind of going rampant out there, addressing it and trying to correct it if at all possible. And then also, because we have in this region, we have such a huge area, and so you have media outlets that cover a wide area and communicate to a lot of different communities. You want to be sure that everyone's saying the right thing and saying the accurate message. So collaborating with the other stakeholder communities that may have been affected, and other organizations to make sure that you're all on the same page as far as what's being said. It's
You
really
know,
important.
if I could say something about the stakeholder agencies, Brian, one of the things I've seen done successfully, saw it in Fort Bend County after the flood there, going to faith-based organizations. There's recovery night. There was where you set a table up. You had people that spoke multiple languages. You have, you got to just, you're out there in the community, even if it's passing out flyers, which we're going to see in just a second, and posting information, just being out there, leaning forward on it and making sure it's somebody's job, that it's them, they're responsible for public information in your debris program, because you don't want to just leave that unknown out there. People will just start making stuff up. I mean, especially on Facebook. That's where they put it. That's where they put all your crazy ideas. They just go directly to Facebook. I mean, it is like high flash beams, right straight there. People just start putting stuff.
Yes, I've certainly seen that happen. So, looking at also in collaborating with stakeholder agencies, I used to work for the Department of State Health Services and in the public information role. And one of the things I used to always do is before I'd send out some kind of public information messaging, if I knew it was going to affect a jurisdiction, I'd send it out to them before it went public, just kind of as a courtesy.
That's a
So
good
they
one.
knew what was going to happen, what the information was, so that they could make sure that they're aware of the information, and if they needed to respond to it, they could. So this is a graphic that has been widely copied across the nation, but it can be found at the H-GAC website, along with a lot of other really good information. There's a video that talks about debris separation, and there's all those. This is also in Spanish on the site. So you can find that information, but this kind of illustrates the importance of separating the debris, and says it in a really easy way, lays it out to how it should be separated out on someone's lawn to be picked up. So some other information on developing public information messages: express empathy, saying, hey, I know this has been hard, I'm going through this as well. So just express empathy and what's going on. Provide relevant, up-to-date information. So you want to be sure and provide them, even if it may not be new, but just reinforce what's going on, the status of the operation, how it may affect them, how it affects the operation of the government, like are offices going to be closed, or how they're going to be affected. Use plain language, avoid things like acronyms and things that people may not be familiar with. Avoid cliches. Also, you want to promote action. Tell them what they need to do. Provide instruction that they can do to be ready, and to get their debris picked up. Show respect. Promote collaboration. Working with the local jurisdiction to get this done, so that all the community can be, the debris operation go as quickly as possible for all the community. And then, of course, make sure that written products are 508 compliant.
So, Brian, let's talk about that 508 compliant information, and how can we, again, for those of you who aren't as familiar with the 508 process, making sure that that information is, because that piece, again, you look at that being a big, a big story within FEMA to make sure everything is 508 compliant.
Yeah, and there's lots of information online to help with that, to make sure that you meet that qualification, and also making sure that everything is written in a way so that those who may not speak English, and others that may need special assistance to be able to receive information, can get that information and follow the instructions.
I think promoting action for those of you who are, again, there's a lot of information out there in the, in electronic, media that you can, you know what you could do? How about old Chat GPT? Let me tell you, that is a really, really, really great. For those of you who aren't as familiar with AI, machine learning, artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, which I'm not, there's a bunch of different things. Microsoft's coming out with their own thing where you could say, hey, ChatGPT, come up. We ought to do that. ChatGPT, come up with a message about putting your debris out. I mean, I'm telling you, it happens, and you can start editing it. You can make, if you need some stuff, there's some really cool resources out there for you. So what I don't want you to feel like is you're on an island. You're on an island. You're the only one out there. That people have been there before, and there's some best practices.
So another thing you have to look out for are trolls. It's kind of a recent thing where you have some people use social media just to anger people, just to get people upset, and just to post comments that just to get people riled up. And so, you just can't win with some of these people and their comments. So you just don't have to feel obligated to engage with every comment. Just know that it's going to happen, and try to post that good information out there, and don't let these things bother you too much. So you may have some no notice incidents, and you want to be as prepared as possible for when those happen, because when it does happen, the media is going to call very quickly and they'll consume a lot of your time. So it's going to be hard to try to put messages together on the fly. And so, one thing is to pre-identify and pre-train people that are ready to respond, that can speak to the media, and then have some messages developed that you can quickly put out there, that you can quickly just modify a little bit and then push out there so that the public can use. So that can help you. If you do have something happen very quickly that's unexpected, then you can just make some quick tweaks to that and push it out there.
Nick, I know you were a part of the city of Austin's, debris operation. That's a no notice event. Tell me how they handled it, especially with some of, a lot of focus, especially with the power outages. How did they handle it? And especially with some of the media there.
Sure thing. One of the things that City of Austin did was try to proactively work with the media on interviews, really, and stories. And we got a call one day that was, hey, can you guys come up to Austin and, attend a press conference? And so we said, sure. And that kind of turned into, hey, you need to participate in this press conference, which was, a whole nother story. But we were happy to be there. So what they did is went to a debris management site, actually, and, set up the cameras to show kind of what was the activity occurring in terms of debris coming in and reduction. And just really worked with them to explain the process. And the media after that went out into the community to see a truck, loading and collecting debris, and interviewed some other residents. So that was, one example. The city wanted to have the media as an ally really explain, why is there a debris management site here that happened to be in a park? Some of the community was, agitated would be the right word, people that couldn't access that park, or were inconvenienced, but which, as to you and I, not a concern, right? We have an operation to run. So that was something that they were trying to work around and to explain the timing and, how long debris collection might be and that sort of thing. So
that's good. I had one incident here in Houston that I remember following Hurricane Ike, and it was where a investigative reporter, one of those hard-hitting super reporter type of people that were always trying to find the gotcha moments. I mean, Nick probably had those people, had him on speed dial trying to get him. But they of course, our debris haulers, the debris management operations people, they get paid not by the hour, they get paid by how much they work, how much they bring in. Okay, it's a fundamental tenet of this operation. And this guy was with his long range camera. Okay. And he had him. I mean, it was here, spy vision type of thing. And these guys were just taking a break. I mean, they were sleeping under their truck or something like that. I mean, sleeping under a tree, because these guys have been working 7 days a week, that sort of thing. And you see them in the studio and they're reviewing the footage of the hard hitting, journalism type of thing. And the debris hauler who was there, luckily he was trained in how to respond there, because I would have just probably walked off set type thing. But you could see his face just go, I mean, oh man, you got me. And really he had to explain, look, our guys don't get paid by the hour. These guys are working really hard. But I guess what it goes to show you is that you never know what kind of
You never know who's there.
You never know who's there with a camera. You never know where that text message is going. You never know where some of these happens. That seems to be quite, debris operations is a great news story. You can see it. You can kind of feel it type thing. And people are always looking to, go down, get down on somebody,
We're going to be working with H-GAC to develop some templates, some message templates. And so just kind of be looking for that on the H-GAC website soon. We'll have those out and developed for you. That hopefully help you if you do need to put some messages together quickly. You can use those to adapt and put some out. Some other advice, if you have a no notice event, provide regular updates, even if the situation hasn't changed much. Just keep visible and provide those regular updates. Include, of course, we've talked about this a lot, but include websites and social media in your communication efforts. Keep watch of any incorrect information, or if there's any rumors that are getting started, try to put a stop to them as quickly as possible before they get out of hand. And then, like John was saying about the aggressive news media. Some of them will be pretty aggressive about pursuing a story. What I used to always do when I worked with the state and with Galveston County is, you find out from them, when do you need this information, and try to help them meet their deadline. And normally you kind of get some respect with them and work with them as much as possible and help them, and they help you to get the information out.
One of the things I will say to Brian before we move on from this and responding to no-notice incidents is understanding the amount of FOIA requests that you're going to get. FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, or Sunshine Law, or wherever, again, for those of you Texas, I mean, that's really common, but understanding that people will try to FOIA the heck out of everything and contracts. And I mean, Nick, well, when you were local governments, you've probably had to deal with FOIA requests, maybe with debris management operations. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, and how you have addressed them?
Well, the best thing to do is find somebody else in your organization that'll handle a FOIA.
That's right. Typically, that's the guy or gal who was out of the room at the time. Yeah. That's right.
Not something that's operationally focused, right? So that's my advice there.
But that is certainly something that's out there.
And on the rest of the, in terms of operations, I mean, working with your PIO, your PIO should be the person that's coordinating all this type of stuff with, the media and communication. So just working operationally, with your communication staff is my advice.
Thanks. Perfect. All right. Now we're going to end today's workshop. In the last 20 minutes are going to be talking about the finances and mitigating risk. As I mentioned before, $8 billion, the single most expensive operations that many local governments will face or ever face following a disaster. And this starts with your own expenses all the way down to those contract expenses. So the first thing is the force account labor. And when I say force account labor, I mean your expenses, your city, county staff time, and understanding that there needs to be a system in place to track those account hours and those activities. this right here, I believe that's 214 maybe. Oh yeah, the old ICS 214. You ought to write that down. That one is really the go-to. That's what people are looking for. That's your activity log there. When it comes to having an accurate account of what did that person do that day. Again, whether it's hour by hour, every 15, 30 minutes, what have you, but having those signed, sealed, and delivered for your organization and understanding how to do it, what to do it, because a lot of times the guys and gals who are out there doing this work may not be ever trained on it. And that's something that, again, these hours add up, and this oftentimes is I know it's an eligible expense, but it oftentimes can get up there. I mean, I know that's a big challenge up in Central Texas, as well as a lot of our communities that we work with, is documenting those force account labor expenses and having an accurate record there. So what do we need? Staff, the name, the function, the title. What do they do? The work performed, their pay rates, their days and hours works, their regular time and overtime, what your pay policy is, and their fringe rates. Understanding that pay policy is a big deal, and making sure you're following that pay policy. We've seen everything from a pay policy that is active just for disasters, which is something that can draw some scrutiny, and certainly something you want to take a look at prior to disaster. You want to make sure you're being able to tie that staff time to the equipment, the type and staff, the location that it's worked, who is the operator, and what is the rate for that piece of equipment. Now, your rate for the piece of equipment can be found on, FEMA has a schedule of values for a piece of equipment. You may be able to put two pieces together. You got your trailer and your chassis. You have a workman plus truck type thing. You're able to recover those, and you may, like I said, you may have to put things together, especially if it is some equipment that is uniquely fabricated for your jurisdiction. Rented equipment is something we always, recommend and encourage, is being able to identify that rental equipment and the number of days that rented a piece of equipment was used, and the location, who was operating it, and again, making sure that you have your staff time. So again, this starts to get complicated. I'm gonna be honest with you, because you have to have your 214, and then you have to tie it to your equipment, and then you have to, maybe it's rented equipment, and then you have to look at your pay policy, and maybe that person is on Kronos or whatever. I don't know whatever systems are out there for your pay policy, that you have to make sure everything is ticking and tying. I mean, that's something I say a lot to our team. Make sure everything ticks and ties. That's Dave Yankeeism right there, Cheryl. I picked it up from him, and I haven't been able to shake it after 20 plus years. And that is something that we is a big lift. It's certainly something that we have to make sure that is all together, especially for debris. Supplies, what are you using? What's your consumables? An inventory of those records, whether that is paper, maps, plotters, whatever you use. Mutual aid request, the STAR request form, isn't that right, Brian? The you may have to use this. Have that written agreement. The one thing I will say about the mutual aid is in some situations, especially at a local level where you have a jurisdiction that is helping out a nonprofit, it's helping out the Little Sisters of the Poor, or a food bank, somebody has some debris, that sort of thing. And the mutual aid is just done with a, kind of spit and handshake type thing. That can be collected after a disaster. So it's not necessarily that the mutual aid has to occur prior to the benefit being given to that jurisdiction, but it's certainly something that you want to have it at some point. We have had several situations. I think there was a couple of counties that were helping out some MUDs, the municipal utility districts, or the special utility districts, somebody who had some debris removal, and ultimately it was put in place. The agreement was, signed, sealed, and ultimately turned into to FEMA, and that the invoices were requested, received, and paid. So, again, when it comes to this stuff, you're non-contracted, because Nick's going to get into that in just a second, but you got to have your force account. You got to have your 214. You have to have your Chronos, or again, I'm going to just use Chronos because that's the only system that I know right now. That you have your work performed. You got to have your equipment, and then your consumables and any mutual aid. Now, a big part of this, as Brian mentioned, is donated resources. So you have everybody from, the Baptist Men's Operation Lions Club, UMCOR. I know that there's some other folks who are doing cleanup out there. Having the names of those individuals, their activities, their equipment, supplies, what did it cost them? All those costs that can help you be able to offset some of those, your local federal share when it comes up to FEMA, especially if the activity is associated with an eligible activity under the FEMA program. So again, make sure it's clear that they are doing debris removal and making sure that that's all correct. So preposition contracts. I know we've talked through this. This is a tremendous element of what we see, what we do. And Nick, I know you got, or Brian, maybe we'll all three. The three tenors. It's gonna be like Pavarotti. You look like Pavarotti there, Nick. A little bit. Maybe the beard. It looks good. But no, this is huge. Preposition contracts. We can let's talk through that, Brian.
Yeah, so I mean, the whole idea is to have it lined up ahead of time, so you're not having to go through the difficult and the process it takes to go through your procurement process during a disaster. So you've gotten it all out of the way. Plus, you're not in a good position to negotiate rates and all those kind of things during a disaster as much. I remember during Harvey, people were calling me saying, "Hey, I'm trying to get some contracts lined up with a debris hauler, but no one's returning my calls." And it's like, well, they're all really busy and they don't need the business right now. They don't need your business. And so I said, I can't make them call you. So, it's just important to have it lined up so you don't have to have that issue. You have it lined up ahead of time, and then the contractors will be there at your disposal when you need it.
There was a guy in the Houston area, Joe Keene. Joe Keene was with City of Bel Air. Joe was worried about, and I don't think he's with City of Bel Air Public Works Director anymore, but he was there during Ike. And boy, he was worried about that very issue right there. He wanted to have a preposition contract. He wanted to be tied to Harris County. And he was small city, Bel Air inside Houston. And he was worried that he wanted to make sure people were going to show up. And he had this preposition contract. And he wanted to be with a reputable company that was there and that knew what the heck they were doing and were going to be there. And that is, again, a value of this contract right here. I mean, so we're going to go into how to put that in place for your organization.
Yeah, of course, some other things to keep in mind, a value of these preposition contracts. Other people are going to be commuting, trying to get those same resources, save you a lot of time.
Yeah.
You can negotiate better rates. And then, like I said, they may be stretched thin. They won't want to answer their phone or return their calls.
One thing I would mention is, in case you're wondering, I mean, if you don't have one or you've never seen one, but every preposition contract that I've seen is not, you're not spending money at this time. It's not costing you anything, right? So you have the avenue of having the contract in place should you need it, and then obviously be paying for that work performed at a later date.
Yeah, that's a really important consideration. Yeah, you're not putting money up front, just your time and effort in getting the contract established. And then you can always have backups. So you can have a backup contract and even a backup to the backup if necessary.
You know what? Well, while we're talking about benefits, Nick, and one of the things, we'll go back to the Central Texas ice storm. The one thing that I would bet the folks in Central Texas would say about having a preposition contract is that they didn't have to answer all those dang phone calls or all those contractors who were, shark circling the water because they heard Williamson County or wherever county didn't have the contract, and they were knocking on every door and making all these phone calls, all those sorts of things. And you could get right to business instead of just beating them up, with the stick. That's certainly something that we know happens, and you can get right to work.
So to set up a pre-position contract, you have to have, of course, you have to follow the federal guidance as far as making the procurement. So it has to have full and open competition. You have to have a scope of work developed that talks about the anticipated disaster work that they're going to be involved in. As much as possible, you want to include small and minority businesses, women business enterprises, labor surplus area firms, give them the opportunity to bid on that. And then make sure when you're going through your the responses you get back from your requests for proposals, that you evaluate and document the contractor's integrity, compliance with public policy, record of past performance, their financial their financial standing, and their resources that they have to devote to your response. So it's really important to make sure they're qualified.
And Brian, I want to go to that third bullet, ensuring that small minority-owned businesses are included in the publication of the procurement. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. And I want to make sure you are looking at the 7 affirmative steps that jurisdictions must take or subrecipients. And this one is huge. And again, for those of you who there's a lot of different ways to do this. There's a lot of different resources, a lot of different chambers of commerce that you could publish this to ensure that everybody is aware and everybody's knowledgeable about the opportunity.
Yeah, some other things on the checklist that you must do is make sure the contractor is not suspended or debarred. You can't, and another thing is you can't give preference to a contractor based on their geographic position. So just because one is right across the street from you doesn't mean you can give them preferential treatment. So you have to, you can't give any preferential treatment based on geographic location of the contractor. And then you can't use a contractor that develops your statement of work. So in other words, you might, if you ask a contractor to develop a scope of work for you, they may write it so they'll get the work, more so specific to them that no one else could really win. So the idea is to make sure that, you don't, if you do have someone develop a statement of work, that you don't use, you don't include them in the bid.
And there's a lot of publicly available information out there on procurement, especially for debris. I mean, you can Google up debris, or go to BidSync, or go to BidNet, or go to bid.com, or I don't know what all of them are, but there's a ton of different statements of work out there. So you really can avoid that number 3, which could be, not so good for you down the road.
Okay. So of course, you want to make sure that everything meets the federal procurement regulations. You also want to make sure the costs are reasonable. So in the current environment. So just making sure that the costs line up right. So just to quickly go through the rest of these, you can only use usually you have to make sure that you have a competitive bid and that you get, some bids that you can compare the cost and their capabilities. You can only use a non-competitive proposal when there's only a single source that provides a service, or there's some kind of big emergency that's going on that will not permit a delay, or FEMA is actually expressly authorizing a non-competitive proposal. So, or if you just don't get any responses to your response for proposals, or request for proposals. So typically you have to have a competitive proposal process.
And we talk about people's opinion and people opining on different things. Exigent and emergent are 2 that people like to have opinions about. and the justification of those. And again, this one, when we say non-competitive proposal, that means that you just went out to somebody and said, hey, Jerry, Larry, Nick, whoever, we need you right now without delay. And it is, I don't have time to get 3 bids. I need this right now. Let's go. This is the stuff you need to be aware of. Okay. And it happens. This is, what do we say, that 2 weeks, 2 days, 2 weeks? That's the hot water period. This is what we're talking about. And this is the hot water that you can really get yourself in. And because you're not going to be that frog in the pot of water where it, gets turned up the heat slowly. It's going to be quick and you're going to be jumping.
Okay, and so FEMA reimburses cost using only 3 types of contract payments. So there's fixed price, where you have just one overall price for the project, cost reimbursement, and then time and materials. So time and materials, they do allow that for a limited extent. So particularly at the beginning of after a disaster, when you're looking at clearing roads and trying to get things done, they'll give you a little bit of leeway there during that time period for clearing roads. Other than that, you really need to follow the competitive bid process. There's some required provisions you need to make sure that your contracts have in place. And I won't go through all those. And then
Hey, just make sure these are in there. This is like, just hold on, because people look for those, and you can, even if you have a contract right now and you go back to it and go, holy smokes, I don't have any of this on there. You can add it to a contract. We've seen that done quite a bit, and making sure that is in, and those required provisions, just to make everything safe and sound. But that is, I think it kind of leads into that next slide about the PDAT field manual, Procurement Disaster Assistance Team.
Yeah, so there is a team available to help you, and they have there's a manual online. I've got the link there if you want to look at it, to help in procurement of services. And the PDAT team is also there to help if you need some assistance in that regard as well. Of course, maintain good records when you're going through and getting your scoring out your the responses to the RFP. So, make sure you document the rationale on why you use that method of procurement, the contract type, why you selected or rejected a particular person or contractor, and then the basis for the contract price. So make sure all that is documented.
Well, with that, I think we have maybe something in the chat. Awesome PDAT manual with examples. Okay. Yes, it is. And it's out there, and we are done with our prepared remarks. I'll tell you, we appreciate everybody's attendance here. We thank you so much. For those of you who came here in person, thank you very much as well. We've thoroughly enjoyed this time. We've got a virtual training. We scheduled that one yet, Brian? Oh,
yes, it has been scheduled. I forget the date though.
July 20th.
July 20th.
July 20th will be virtually. The same three tenors here, 3 debris managers, and we'll be here, talking about debris operations. If you do have any questions, we will be here to answer. Let's see. I think we hit everything. Well, that's it. Well, good deal. Well, thank you all very much. We have some closing comments here.
Thank you, everyone. We just wanted to mention that if you're looking for the PDF or the recording from this content, it will be posted online, and we'll be sending an email out about that when that happens. So yeah, thank you.
The survey.
And the survey is posted in the chat. If you could be so kind as to give us your thoughts about how everything went today, we would really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.